Hello, today on my channel you will hear an amazing story about life. I hope you enjoy this story. This one struck me to the core. Honestly, I still can't forget it. Enjoy watching.
Mike went to work with a heavy heart. He was in a bad mood. The relationship with the new morgue director, John Smith, was to blame. There's a reason they say a new broom sweeps in a new way. I made those speeches at first. I emphasized honesty. And what happened? Come on, what is there to say? Everything is clear, Mike thought, realizing that it was not the first time he had fought with his superiors. Life was complicated, and those who were used to standing up for the truth to the end always had a hard time. He didn't think he was special. Not at all. He just tried to work in such a way that he wouldn't be ashamed of himself. His older colleague Brian felt the same way. He was the one who had to suffer for everyone and had to, as they say, take the hit for himself. He was fired for too harsh expressions in the direction of his superiors. Remembering this unpleasant scene, Mike felt very irritated. The new director then for the first time showed his true face, firing his partner 2 years before retirement. There's nothing to finish working, you'll go as a janitor somewhere as a last resort. After the morgue, they don't take you anywhere, do they? People here are so superstitious. They say that if you hire a person from the morgue, trouble will come. It's ridiculous. It's like the Middle Ages, but I'm not worried. I'm not old yet. I've got arms and legs and a head on my shoulders. I'll figure it out somehow, Brian said calmly. He was always so unshakably calm now. He didn't like to lose his temper and say stupid things in the heat of the moment. He spoke to everyone in an emphatically polite manner, whether it was a grandmother picking up her son from the morgue or a market director whose pockets were filled with money. He instilled this attitude in Mike to the new director. It seemed alien, and in some places even stupid. John Smith valued only money and anything of any material value to him. The morgue seemed like a place where money could be shoveled in, that the relatives of the deceased would always come through. What price you say? They'd pay it. No, of course, you don't need to be blatantly impudent. Remove the foam, and that's enough. Otherwise, there will be a resonance, circles on the water. Who needs it? Was the director's opinion when he fired the stubborn, orderly Brian. He was not embarrassed by the fact that he had a sick wife as a dependent, for the treatment of whom all his earnings were spent. Brian had worked in the morgue for many years and had seen a lot of things. He knew some of the tricks and had taught them to Mike. Always be a human being. Mike, don't give me any reason to doubt you. Everybody thinks we're all bribe takers. I bet you thought that when you got here, didn't you? Yeah, I did, Mike replied. I was a nurse before the morgue. 3 years ago, you may have heard, at the ambulance station, when a woman who'd been injured in an accident died in my arms, I broke down like that. It just made my hands go down. I swear to God, I started dreaming about that scene at night. I had to quit. Brian patted his colleague sympathetically on the shoulder. What can I say? In such cases, words are often unnecessary. Brian realized that Mike's fault was minimal. He was a nurse, not a doctor or a paramedic, but there was still no peace of mind. Brian's dismissal was hard on Michael. After all, his best friend and colleague in one person, always listens, will give sound advice in the work. He did his job as well as Mike, side by side. Dirty or clean, it's all the same. There's a set of rules to follow. We'll talk about it later. Even though Mike was in a hurry to get to work as soon as possible, he decided to walk today instead of taking public transportation. He was eager to have a word with Brian, who had taken the director's advice and gotten a job as a janitor. When Mike saw his former colleague from afar, he waved to him. Brian was unrecognizable. The fresh air had made his cheeks rounder and his eyes brighter. Hey Mike, you coming to visit? You think I miss my old job? I don't miss it one bit, believe me. I'm even feeling better. My cough is completely gone. I thought it was chronic. You know how much chemicals from disinfection pass through our lungs in the morgue? Mike smiled. I could see that you've gotten a lot better looking, Johnson. Very noticeable, he shook his head. Then he took the orderly under the elbow and led him somewhere deep into the yard. Come on, Mike, I'll show you my menagerie. Well, there are stray dogs, cats, I feed them as much as I can. I don't have much money. Michael nodded sympathetically. He would have been glad to call him back. But the director had already put his nephew, Tom Johnson, in Brian's place, a money-hungry, free-spending guy just like his uncle. Rumor has it he used to work in surgery, but he got caught up in petty theft. He had his eye on the accountable line of drugs. When he was caught red-handed, thanks to the intervention of a powerful uncle, the scandal was hushed up. But who would want to quarrel with the director of the morgue? Here, as they say, it's more expensive. So he ended up in the morgue. Working with him was like hard labor for Mike, but there's nothing to do. Who has it easy these days? Brian looked at his friend with surprise. Mike, what are you doing? What are you thinking about? Come with me, I said. I'll show you my menagerie. I had a cat die here recently. She didn't give birth to dead kittens. Not all the way, but she still had live babies. Can you believe the dog fed them to her puppies? I've only seen that once in my life. I'm looking at it, and tears are coming out of my eyes. Can you believe it? I gave away all the kittens. There's only one left. A gray, fluffy one. I don't know much about cats, but it looks like a Siberian breed. And what kind of a Mauser will he be? His mom was just like that. What's there to say? Why don't you take yourself? Mike thought about it. He didn't have any pets at the moment, although he treated them normally and always tried to feed them as much as he could. For example, when he came from the store, he would take a sausage out of the bag and divide it equally among his tailed friends. Well, those animals are adults, but here is a kitten. It needs care. It needs care. Bathing, flea collar and all that. Seeing the doubt in his friend's eyes, Brian smiled. Don't worry, I'll help you if you need it. And this is no ordinary kitten. Take my word for it, I've never seen such an unusual one before. And in general, it seems to me that this is a human being. Well, not in the literal sense, of course, but only his soul, but moved as it were. Vaska looks at me, and it seems that it is not a kitten at all, but a little boy, can you imagine? At the mention of a boy, Mike's heart began to beat uneasily. Could he really get a kitten? Bobby would probably be thrilled. True, they wouldn't let him go to the orphanage, and a little kitten wouldn't survive in the yard. It's not summer, but it's okay. At least on weekends I'll bring it in my pocket. Let him play. You know, Johnson, I think I'll take him. Bobby will be glad, and you'll feel better too. It's one less animal to worry about. Brian patted his comrade on the shoulder approvingly. Right, good choice. How are you doing with the adoption? I see you're determined to take Bobby in. Mike looked confused for a moment and soon answered. Yes, Johnson, I want to take him in. You know, he's been family to me for a long time. I guess this meeting wasn't a coincidence, you know. I delivered Bobby's mom when she got hit in the crosswalk. It was a terrible sight. I'll tell you that. She was doing her best to help her son into the world. As soon as it happened, she died. Poor thing was in agony. Since then, I can't work in an ambulance station. When I see this case in front of my eyes and everything, a lump comes to my throat. Tears choke me. I want to cry. Yeah, I agree. It's not pleasant, Brian sighed sympathetically. Mike continued. That's how Bobby's mom ended up an orphan in the first place. Her fiancé left her or something. Anyway, the kid ended up in an orphanage after the birth. They won't let me take him. They say the living space doesn't allow it. And my marital status too. There's no trust in a single man. They say if you had a couple, Mike Johnson, it'd be all right. But who's going to look after the boy when I go to work? I could hire a nanny, but with my salary, you know what I mean? And I don't want to take money from clients for nothing. And you're right. It's not a good thing to rob people who are already bad and who, on the contrary, need help, not to pull out the last from the purse. They've lost someone close to them. That little Ethan, by the way, what's the news in the morgue? Mike looked carefully into his friend's eyes, thinking whether he should talk about what was going on or not. Suddenly, with his words, he would touch a painful topic in his soul, and Johnson would then be sad until midnight and take pills for his heart. Well, if he's asking, he better say. You know, I didn't mean to complain to him. Only the morgue's a mess right now. That John guy's doing whatever he wants. The new director's got his own rules and raised his rates, and he's got his nephew overseeing the process. Tom Johnson's a tricky one. Never misses a dime in his life, and the director ordered cameras in the morgue a week ago. Can you believe it? Like there's anything to steal. Why the surveillance? Did he really put them everywhere and not be afraid? Brian wondered. No, Johnson. In the room where people say goodbye to the deceased. It's to keep theft down and all that. By the way, what kind of theft could there be in a place like this? Anyway, our boss is slowly going crazy, but so are we, Mike summarized. You know, don't get discouraged. Keep your head up. Okay, Katie, I'll give you one. I named Vasily through my dead man's files. When you get home from work, I'll give it to you. Just don't forget to come by. I'll bring you some food. He's eating this soft stuff now, you know, like Pate, and you'll buy some milk or something at the store, won't you? Okay, Mike smiled visibly and hurried off to work. He didn't like being late. And he also guessed that John Smith didn't arrive early for nothing, so he knew who came to the workplace and at what time. The new director liked to control everyone and everything, and in case of disobedience he punished them with penalties in the form of forfeiture of bonuses or something else. Mike himself didn't count on those bonuses because he didn't take bribes and didn't fill up the director's personal coffers. John Smith probably would have kicked him out too, but only after Brian Johnson and Mike were fired. There would be no real professionals left in the morgue. No, the pathologist, and of course there were some other first-rate craftsmen. What can I say? Except a pathologist is nowhere without an orderly. Who's going to do the hard work? Who will disinfect the room or give the body of the deceased to relatives? There are a lot of duties, and you need to keep track of everything, because morgue attendants are valued as well as specialists of a higher level. On the way to work, Mike tried to distract himself from sad thoughts and thought again about Bobby. who was looking forward to a day off to meet his dad. Realizing the responsibility he had, the orderly never came empty-handed. How can you not when you see Bobby's eyes so dear to you? Mike always, before visiting the orphanage, went to the store with sweets and all kinds of baked goods, candy, bars, cakes, buns with condensed milk. All of this went into Bobby's gift bag. Michael had never been stupid, either. That's why he tried to buy goodies for Bobby's friends, at least one chocolate candy or a caramel. And tangerine apples. Kindergarten fraternity, no offense. It's a sacred thing. Even the staff of the orphanage called Mike Daddy, and when they met him, they always greeted him and wished him a good day. They all knew the sad story of the boy, and therefore sincerely felt sorry for the 3-year-old orphan. Unfortunately, the villain who hit Bobby's mother was never found. Detective cameras were not working at that moment, or the witnesses of the accident suddenly had a sudden temporary amnesia, and they could not remember anything. The case remained unsolved, dusted on a shelf in one of the investigative departments. It would seem that everything happens on the road, but this case was just egregious. A pregnant woman was crossing a crosswalk and had almost reached the saving sidewalk when some drunken rich man flew out of the corner of the SUV. This tragedy was much written about in the newspapers, and the case itself was unique. Is it a joke? During a traffic accident, the mother died, but her newborn baby was saved by incredible efforts. And not only to save, but also to let him be born naturally, without a C-section. Mike always remembered the look of the dying woman in labor, looking into his eyes. Then the young nurse did not immediately understand what Bobby's mother Sarah was trying so hard to tell him. It was later, recalling the phrase on her blue lips, that Mike realized the woman was asking him to help her newborn son. If only someone knew what Mike had been through that day in the ambulance. There aren't enough words or emotions to describe something like that. And also this painful pinching feeling in the soul, when you hold the hand of a dying woman and realize that she had just known the joy of motherhood. And now she was saying goodbye to him forever. The next day, Mike wrote a settlement application and mentally vowed that he would help the newborn, take care of him for the rest of his life, as the deceased had asked him to do. Mike's parents were sympathetic to their son's action. Being people of low income, they lived in a small house in the suburbs. But, despite this, in their family has always reigned love and mutual respect, and the lack of a large income only further united the couple. "It's okay, Bobby. I'll be sure to pick you up." "You don't even doubt it," Mike said to himself every time, agonizingly searching for a way out of the situation. When his new colleague Tom Johnson learned about it, his comments were cynical beyond belief. "You don't need an orphan. Find yourself a normal girl, marry her, have as many kids as you want, and it'll be your own blood, you understand. So why would you raise someone else's boy? What if he has a bad heredity? Or something else? No offense, brother, but as far as I'm concerned, it's just stupid." Mike bit his lip, but didn't fight back. Why argue? Let each man keep his own opinion. How could he explain to this rotten man that Bobby was his favorite person, because it was with his help that the baby first saw the light of day? Finally, the building of the city morgue appeared ahead. Mike mentally tuned to work. But as soon as he crossed the threshold of the institution, John Smith immediately approached him. In his hands, he held a small notebook with some notes. "You're late, Mike. You were 5 minutes early yesterday. What happened today? You overslept, didn't you? You've been out all night? I can tell by the look in your eyes you're having fun. I don't mind. Of course, I'm young. But if there's no money in your pocket, you won't be able to have fun. So let's keep up the good work. But don't forget about the visitors, how to formalize it," said John Smith. Barely containing his excitement, Mike asked, "What about the price list?" "You're like a little kid, by golly. You've got to be a little high, and you've got to be a little cheeky, like Tom Johnson. He tells you the price right away, and everybody's happy. But you're being sneaky, making up stuff about some old ladies. You feel sorry for the moms with lots of kids. You shouldn't be working in a morgue. Mike, you should be working in a nursing home. You're too sensitive about these things," John Smith replied. Mike's anger slowly boiled up inside him. In his mind, he had already imagined the picture of the moment when his patience would run out and he would tell the bribe taker what he thought of him. However, the anger soon passed, and Mike calmed down as if nothing had happened. John Smith continued, "Yes, Mike, I forgot to tell you, you're in charge today. I'll have other things to do. I sent Tom Johnson down to the funeral parlor to see what's what, and then I'm going to contract with their management to sell funeral paraphernalia in our morgue, so to speak, without leaving the cash register. Well, not for nothing, of course, but for a small share, and it will be good for them, and not bad for us. You see what I'm getting at? So today you'll be in charge of handing out the bodies and communicating with the relatives of the dead. And don't do anything amateurish. I hope you've seen the hidden cameras. Well, I'll be sure to review the day's footage, and if I see a violation, you'll lose your bonus. Don't worry about it. It's not personal," John Smith added. Mike's face darkened. That's right, the cameras. How could he have forgotten about them? But nothing. It would be fine. Then, as he was about to leave, John Smith noticed that the body of a rich woman had arrived early this morning. "Well, it should be prepared first of all, so that it can be sent to the crematorium without delay," he said. "What about the post-mortem?" After all, the pathologist just got to work 10 minutes ago, Mike asked in surprise. We'll do without an autopsy in this case. I've spoken to the deceased's husband as an exception. Everything that needs to be done there has been agreed. She was actually found on the riverbank. And now, it's not summer, the water is cold, and she either fell off the bridge or decided to jump, John Smith replied. Try to figure it out now. Anyway, the heart couldn't take it, so there's no need for an autopsy today. Mike nodded uncertainly, still not understanding what was happening right now. Before his eyes, he was violating the very inviolable instructions that no one had ever tried to circumvent before. With the arrival of this tricky little guy, everything had gone downhill. Yeah, Mike, why don't you let me know? He's going to be here soon to say goodbye and so forth. He wants to send his wife straight to the crematorium without any delays or any other unnecessary formalities. So you make sure everything's all right. Pillow, all the trappings. Although in my opinion, what difference does it make when and in what form one goes to the other world? John Smith added and headed for his office. Mike exhaled doomedly and went to change his clothes. He had a lot of work ahead of him because today he was alone and had to fulfill the workload of the two of them. The first thing the orderly did was to go to the deceased, whose life had been taken by a heart attack. As it had been decided not to perform an autopsy, the deceased was in her clothes. Wearing protective gloves, Mike moved closer to the deceased and could hardly contain a surprised cry. My God, is it really her? Not a sure thing, of course, but it looks a lot like her. No, it's exactly the same. She has the same face shape, cheekbones, nose, lips, Mike whispered. Understand, the guy had a photographic memory, and more often than not he remembered even the things he didn't really need either at work or in everyday life. A mistake seemed unlikely to him. The deceased was clearly the stranger from the bus. Mike's mood had finally soured, and for good reason. Few people knew that a couple of weeks ago, Mike had had an unpleasant accident that had made him reconsider his outlook on life in general. Remembering such a painful thing made Mike cringe, and there was nothing to be embarrassed about. It happened in the morning, when the young orderly was rushing to work during rush hour, just like the rest of the city. There are so many people on the bus that it is impossible to push through. Everyone is trying to catch up on their business, and students, schoolchildren. But the bus is not a rubber bus, and everyone realizes that. Mike mostly rode standing up, giving his seat to pensioners or children. What's he got? Strength. And the job's not that hard. It's not like unloading coal cars, and the fact that it's not a pleasant sight. Who's having a good time? Every job is important and hard in its own way. This day, there were as many people on the bus as herrings in a barrel. Being squeezed from both sides, Mike prayed to God that he managed to get off at the right stop because of the heavy influx of passengers. He didn't have time to pay the fare, and when he tried to do it, he found out the most unpleasant thing. His wallet had been stolen. Someone's dexterous and professionally trained hand easily pulled it out of his jacket pocket and was gone. At this point, the female controller decided to restore order on the bus. So, citizens, step aside and pay the fare. And there's no need to be indignant. You're the ones who made this mess. You should have waited for the next bus instead of rushing forward. Mike looked longingly at his empty pocket and realized that he couldn't avoid an unpleasant conversation. Methodically going around passenger by passenger, the controller collected the fare. When Mike's turn came, he tried to explain as gently as possible what had happened. The young orderly's argument sounded quite adequate and reasonable, but the controller was not at all moved by his words. The purse you say was stolen. What about it? Shall I sympathize with you some more? Or should I compensate for the damage from my own pocket? Some clever guy had a clever idea. I won't pay because my purse was stolen, she said wryly. Mike's cheeks flared with shame. You think I'm lying? How is that even possible? It's not like this is the first time I've used this route. She looked at the passenger incredulously. There you go, 25 again. I told you in Russian, if you don't have money, get off the bus. Otherwise, I might even call the police, and they'll figure you out quickly. You probably don't work anywhere, so you just drive around. And don't look at me sideways. I'll give you a ticket. Let's see how you sing then, she added. After these words, Mike realized that further conversation with the inspector was useless. He had only traveled halfway. Now, as long as he got off, as long as he got to work, he would be late and would get a reprimand from the director. And coming back isn't an option either. John Smith is a pedant. He's got to have everything organized. The next stop appeared ahead, and the supervisor looked at Mike with a triumphant look. What are you standing there like a statue? Move, boy, move. What happened a little later surprised not only Mike, but also the controller. She was suddenly approached by a young woman sitting near the scene of the drama. Here, take this. It's just enough to pay the fare, she said, holding out the money. The checker gave the passenger a mocking look. What are you, citizen? Have you completely lost your mind? Did you believe this swindler? They have schemes that you have never dreamed of. My mother got a call from the same charlatan last Friday, claiming to be an employee of the credit department. My mother gave out all her bank card details in good conscience. They took it all out, the bloody bastards, because it was a fraud, no other way. But it wasn't the young man's fault. Why take out your anger on him? And anyway, his purse was stolen on this very route. So, if you want, you can think of a criminal conspiracy, objected the passenger. Mike breathed convulsively. He felt extremely embarrassed that such a fragile woman had stood up for him. Come on, there's no need for anything. No police or proceedings. I'll get off at this stop, that's all. The controller smiled victoriously again, realizing that once again she had gotten her way. They're having a debate. They're only distracting me from my work. It's as simple as 2 times 2. If you don't have money, get off the bus or pay a fine. If you have money, you're welcome. Take your seats according to the tickets you bought, sir. As soon as Mike was out of the cabin and the door shut behind him, the conductor sneered, turning to the stranger who stood in his defense. That's good. I'll tell you what, honey, don't be such a simpleton and don't believe the first person you meet. I know what I'm saying. My own husband robbed me, took a loan on my passport and went to the sea with his mistress. So remember my words, because men are nothing but trouble and you shouldn't trust them. You're still young. The passenger was silent. You've expressed your opinion a little, but you've made your point. And you did it much more sharply than you should have. You know, I've put up with your rudeness for a long time. I've had several complaints about you, but I turned a blind eye. Now I've seen for myself, and if this continues, I'll be forced to solve the problem radically. The supervisor's face changed in an instant. And who are you, anyway? Are you a cheat? I don't intend to answer to you. I was put here to ensure order while traveling along the route. Is that so? And for control. To make sure there are no stallways on the route. The stranger turned pale and looked defiantly into the eyes of the woman standing before her. Who am I, you ask? All right, I'll answer. The new owner of Emily Brown's transportation company. You didn't know. The previous owner went belly up and fled overseas. I bought his company. I paid off the wages. Now I'm going to renew the bus fleet, but I feel that I could use some changes with my employees. The controller's lips quivered with fear. She did not want to lose her job. No matter how you look at it, it's a good job. She caught stowaways and pocketed part of the fine. But most importantly, power, where else she realizes her ambitions. At home in front of the TV, or with a mop and a rag.
In some rundown office. Here, excuse me, Emily Brown, the company owner, prompted. That's right, Mrs. Brown, I mean. That's not what I meant to say at all, the controller continued, stammering on every syllable. Yes, I know what you meant to say. All right, get on with your work. But I don't want to see anything like that again. By respecting the passengers, you respect yourself first of all, since you represent my transportation company.
It was clear from the woman controller's face that she had learned her lesson and was eager to rectify the situation right now.
Well, Emily smiled, signaling that the incident was over. Of course, Mike didn't know about all of this, since he hadn't watched the finale of this drama to the end. But now the orderly was only sure of one thing. In front of him lay the same stranger, who was not afraid to intercede for him on the bus. Of course, there was little honor in that for Mike in truth. He was embarrassed that a woman had stood up for him.
But on the other hand, what happened, happened. What's to think about now? You don't fight when you fight, as they say. Emily, what a pretty name. She's pretty too. She should be alive and well. Why had fate treated her so unfairly? Michael thought bitterly as he looked at the dead woman. He felt a strong sense of regret. After all, he had known her. It was a fleeting acquaintance, of course, but it did not change the essence of the matter. Under the right circumstances, they might even have become friends. Well, not close, of course. How could they be? She's married. So they would exchange a few words in correspondence or call on the phone on holidays. Mike was brought out of a state of sad reflection by the guard's voice behind him. Said the dead woman's husband had arrived. Mike nodded. He thought to himself, Bobby, that husband is so fast, he's in such a hurry to send his wife to the crematorium. Even refused an autopsy. He's not afraid. Paid a lot of money to keep it from happening. And John Smith's happy to do his best. Blurred up in front of him like March snow in the sun. Mike didn't like the visitor at first sight. Andrew Brown behaved arrogantly, showing that he was uncomfortable being in the morgue building. Mike had seen this sort of thing before, but still he couldn't forgive such behavior. Look, honored one, in case you've forgotten, I'll remind you, you're in a medical facility. So please be kind enough to accept the rules as they are, Mike said. What rules could there possibly be here? And then there's that smell. Why does it stink in here? You can't breathe. At all. The businessman was indignant. Mike Krusanoff sighed. That's where you're wrong. There is no odor here. At least not the kind you're talking about. It's the fumes from the disinfectant solution, you know. There's nothing we can do about it now. Cleanliness is paramount. It's the key to safety for both employees and visitors like you.
Okay, bygones. Where's my missus? I'll say a quick goodbye to her and run to the crematorium. And there's so much to deal with right now. It's a pain in the ass. Sign there, sign here, so no day for all the procedures will not be enough, complained Andrew.
Mike had neither time nor energy. nor desire to calm him down. If the businessman was in such a hurry, let him say goodbye quickly and get the hell out of here. He's such a commander, isn't he? There's a boss on a boss and a boss on a boss. Despite the acute dislike for the visitor, Mike did not express his displeasure out loud, suppressing his inner irritation. He said, "Okay, I'll go out for now. And if you say goodbye to your wife, let me or the guard know."
The rich man grinned. "It's unnecessary. You could have stood here. But come on, go and have some fun, get some fresh air. It's brotherly," Andrew said.
Mike went out and was about to agree to the rich man's proposal when he felt an irresistible urge to look at the guard's computer monitor, which was displaying the images from the Keck cameras installed by the director. Mike himself could not explain why he decided to do it. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was something else that had its origin in his anxious soul. Fortunately, the guard was not on the spot, for he, as well as Tom Johnson, had gone on a special errand for John Smith. It's a real mess. The director's already using everyone for his own personal gain. All he can think of is how to fill his pocket as soon as possible, thought the orderly sadly, and began to stare at the monitor. At first, nothing much happened. The rich man stood and looked at his wife lying on the table. Since the surveillance cameras were installed at different angles, Mike could see even the eyes of the guest. To the orderly's surprise, there was not the slightest hint of tears or regret in them. Moreover, the impudent rich man was smiling and clearly felt no remorse for what he was doing here and now. But what Andrew said aloud a little later threw Mike into a state of utter shock. "Well, see how that turned out? I told you not to rush into a divorce, and you kept relying on the prenup. You thought those legal clauses would save you. Well, it didn't. It won't be about your prenup now that I'm the legal heir. You can't prove you've made all that wealth without being married to me, and there's no one to stand up for you. Daddy's gone to the other side of the world. By the way, I'll be honest, he gave you a gift. It's a royal inheritance. Not everyone will get it. Well, never mind. I don't have time to talk to you. I guess I'll be going. Business, you know, but don't let it go to waste." As they say, the rich man smiled and left the room. Mike's first thought was to catch up with him and punch him in the face. But, realizing the wrongfulness of his action, he calmed down and tried to pull himself together. So what if you beat him up? You can't beat the crap out of him, especially since he's rotten to the core. But what did he mean about the inheritance? Maybe we should call the police, show them the tape. Mike liked the idea so much that he grasped it gladly and tried to talk to John Smith about it. But when the director of the morgue heard what Mike was proposing to him, he shouted in protest into the phone receiver. "What are you doing? Are you out of your mind, you moron? I don't need any more police checks around here. I actually installed these cameras just like that without permission, you know, at my own discretion. That's not how it's done. So if anyone finds out about these cameras, I'm going to be in trouble. And what do you care, really? Whether they have an inheritance or not?" This woman had a heart attack. Fell in the cold water, got scared. So her heart failed her. What's the problem? I don't get it. And if you have nothing better to do, I'll give you something to do that you won't be happy about. After the conversation with his boss, Mike lost any desire to communicate with him further. In his heart, he knew that nothing good would come out of this conversation. But due to his innate naivety, he kept hoping and believing that someday everything would change. And if Brian Johnson were with me right now, he'd find a way out, he'd intercede, and he would have turned the director into the police in no time. Because this case is too complicated, too murky, Mike thought. Why would a young, healthy woman die of a heart attack? Although cold water is a dangerous thing, temperature extremes are even more so. That's what Mike thought to himself. Glancing at his watch, he realized that Emily's body would soon be picked up by a hearse and ritual services, and he still had to finish all the procedural formalities as soon as possible and prepare to send the body to the crematorium. But before dealing with the paperwork, Mike decided to visit the deceased to take one last look at her. Basically, they had nothing to do with each other except for the incident on the bus. Anyway, Michael wanted to do something nice for this woman who had stood up for him. He turned on a more powerful lamp overhead, moved closer, and looked at the dead woman closely. Her skin seemed pale and a blush appeared on her cheeks. My God, is she really dead? And she looks as good as alive, thought the orderly. That's the first time I've ever seen anything like that, Mike persisted. It was indeed an unusual sight, because under normal circumstances the skin of the deceased was a different color. Here it looked as if Emily had passed away an hour ago. He scrutinized her face and was about to leave the room when he saw something that made his heart race, his mouth dry, and his lips quiver.
"No, this can't be. How can it be? It's not what I thought it was." Mike's mind raced. He couldn't help it though, because the woman's eyelashes moved slightly, and a barely audible wheeze escaped from her chest. Still not understanding exactly what had happened, Michael leaned over Emily's head and realized to his great amazement that she was breathing.
Or at least trying to breathe. Perhaps water or something else had accumulated in her lungs. At the same moment, Michael rolled Emily onto her side, and some water came out of her mouth. It was hardly the result of her supposed death. It was more likely that a heart attack had indeed taken place. The boy's mind immediately conjured up images from his past, when, As a student in the nurse's training course, he had heard a story about how one could fall into a death-like state even after severe hypothermia. Apparently, that was the case with this poor woman. What happened next? Mike remembered as if in a dream. Called resuscitation team caught an orderly for the fact that he was doing Emily artificial respiration. Together with indirect cardiac massage, Mike's actions saved the medics valuable time, which earned them sincere admiration. Probably, since the time of his work at the ambulance station, he had never felt such strong emotions as he did today. But most of all, the former nurse was afraid that he wouldn't be able to help, and the woman would slip back into oblivion, just like the laboring woman who gave birth to a baby in the ambulance. Fortunately, luck was clearly on Mike's side today. When the director of the morgue found out about such a high-profile event, he immediately began to wiggle around like an eel on a griddle, making up all sorts of excuses for himself. My dear people, how did I know there was a fatal mistake? He excused himself. Especially since the fact of death itself was not recorded by our department, but that only an autopsy was refused. Mike stood silent and looked at the chief with a meaningful look, as if reprimanding him. Come on, what else are you lying about? You're the one who colluded with that rich guy. I'm sure you got a good bribe to settle the autopsy, and if the mistake hadn't come to light, the poor man would have gone to the crematorium. No, that's no way to do the job. Due to the intensity of the workday, Mike could hardly stand up at the end of his shift, and he still had to go to Johnson to take the kitten Vasca. However, there was no difficulty in this, because the janitor was already waiting for him at the place of his usual route. Here, take this. I fed him a little, so you can put it behind the groove. Vasca is actually kind, he won't scratch. But don't forget to buy this milk. He likes it very much, Johnson said with a smile. Mike looked at his former colleague with a smile and felt an indescribable pride in his soul from knowing him. Thanks, Johnson, I'll get it done. You can rest easy. I'm going home now. It's been a long day. I can't tell you everything in 2 words. My head's not thinking straight. I understand. Things happen in life. Come on, take care of yourself, Brian said, shaking his friend's hand goodbye.
The rest of the way Mike thought about what had happened at work today, it must have been a once-in-a-million miracle. There's no other way to put it.
At home, Vasca got even and started jumping around the rooms like a little jumper. In addition to milk, Mike bought him a small house, which was specially equipped for keeping small kittens in it with soft bedding and a small, something like a storm-killed ship's mast, scratching post, and there was a ball on a string for the little one to play with for fun. You see, what a castle you have. Now you will live in it. And when you grow up, we'll buy you another one. That's all. Don't get bored too much, okay? Mike asked with a smile. The kitten looked at him attentively, and then bowed his head as if to say, yes, of course, what are you talking about, master? When Michael came to work again the next day, the city morgue looked more like a hive of activity. Police officers and reporters from the local newspapers were literally hunting for his every word. Calm down. I didn't do anything special. I just stopped by one more time to see if everything was all right. After all, the body was being sent to the crematorium, and there is a special procedure there. It wasn't until later that I noticed his eyelids were fluttering. So I started resuscitation. Mike, unaccustomed to excessive attention, waved away like a pesky fly. As it turned out later, a heart attack and temporary respiratory arrest provoked a cold water in which Emily plunged after falling from the bridge. But what surprised Mike most of all was not even this, but the fact that on the hand of the businesswoman was found a trace of a stun gun. Realizing that without the intervention of his wife Emily, he immediately shared his thoughts with the police. The senator did not forget about the role of John Smith himself, under whose warm wing this fatal deception almost happened. Mike's words were enough for the police. The conversation with the principal was brief. To begin with, he was removed from his position, and a little later, he was prosecuted. It was rumored that in the past John Smith had been a supervisor at some trading base, where he had also managed to leave some criminal traces. And now the whole picture was coming together for John. A real criminal sentence loomed on the horizon. Having lost the support of his uncle, Tom Johnson immediately began to treat the work more conscientiously. It is understandable. Who wants to share the harsh prison life in the company of an accomplice, even if he is your relative? And instead of the compromised John was appointed interim from the former employees. To Mike's great joy, it turned out to be Brian Johnson, whose joy knew no bounds. Those who knew the senator from his long work at the morgue were sure that order would reign there from now on, and no one would charge visitors any extra fees. I didn't work as a janitor for long, but I've done a lot of good for homeless animals. Don't think, Mike, I'll still be helping them after this. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to break up my own menagerie. What do you need to adopt? Anything to sterilize on my dime? Sure, they're giving me a bigger salary now, Brian said eagerly. Mike felt the birds singing in his heart. Little did he know that things would turn out in ways no one could have predicted before. Emily's hapless husband had been arrested immediately after Mike's statement and the sect footage provided. The cunning John Smith tried to destroy it, but Mike had the foresight to remove the footage to avoid tampering with the evidence. As in most such cases, the culprit was money, the big money Emily had received after her father's death. Andrew came from the poorest family, where they still remembered how to live in poverty and dreamed of returning to better times. Had Emily not had a prenuptial agreement drawn up, her spouse would have been fine with a divorce. But so Andrew wanted to enter into the right of inheritance after the death of his wife. So he made a date with his wife on the bridge. By and large, he didn't push her into the water. It was an accident. In the heat of the struggle, he touched Emily's arm with a stun gun. She flinched and collapsed, clutching her heart. As luck would have it, the woman's body didn't go to the bottom, but washed ashore.
That's where the peculiarity, which was noticed only by the resuscitator Mike, unlike most people. Emily's heart was located in the right side of the chest, so her husband could not feel its beating. He couldn't feel a pulse at all, from which the hapless businessman concluded that his wife was dead, and further actions of the scoundrel were already a matter of technique. Bribes, and more bribes.
Under the direct patronage of John Smith, who decided to profit from the case. Had it not been for Mike's attentiveness, the tragedy could hardly have been avoided. On the third day after the incident, Mike decided to visit Emily in the hospital. Fortunately, there was no longer a ban on visiting from the medical staff, and the businesswoman herself gladly accepted the guy she knew. Now we're even, she said with a smile. Yes, that's right. I recognized you right away, Mike replied, still afraid to switch to you. But Emily quickly diffused the situation with a couple of good jokes. Soon the young people were chatting like friends who had known each other for decades, talking with Emily. Mike felt an incomparable feeling of comfort and coziness. Despite her wealth, she behaved naturally and did not brag about her social status. Mike told everything about himself without secrecy, doing it sincerely from the heart. When Emily learned that he wanted to adopt a boy from an orphanage, tears glistened in the corners of her eyes. God, I had no idea there were people like you left in the world, she whispered in a trembling voice. Mike did not immediately realize the reason for her tears. A little later, Emily told him that she had been unable to get pregnant for several years. All the blame was bad heredity, because of which Emily's pregnancy was terminated early, where only she did not turn. But everything was useless. However, husband Andrew did not bother at all. By this time, the cunning lover already had several mistresses, which he changed like gloves, giving them expensive gifts, bought, of course, at the expense of his wife. After listening to Mike's story, Emily wiped away a tear and said, "Don't you worry, I'll help you with the adoption. If you need to push the board of trustees and need references, we'll get them together. But the best thing in such cases is sponsorship. Well, money for repairs, toys, furniture, and the children will be happy." "Thank you very much. I'm very grateful to you," Mike said in a trembling voice. "Well, that's enough gratitude for me. For the rest of my life," Emily said with a smile. They laughed, which immediately attracted the attention of the nurse, who glanced in their direction with obvious disapproval.
A couple of days later, Mike learned shocking news received during another interrogation of Emily's husband. The detainee Andrew Brown 3 years ago hit a pregnant woman in a crosswalk. It was his SUV at breakneck speed swept past, leaving the unfortunate woman in labor absolutely no chance. Thanks to his connections and quick decisions, Andrew managed to get away with it and keep the case quiet. But now, caught in the police station, he could not hide this fact and laid it out before the investigators, insisting on a sincere confession. Having learned about it, Mike wanted to go straight there and teach the scoundrel a good lesson. But then, weighing all the pros and cons, he realized that nothing can be returned.
Although, on the other hand, without wanting to, Mike did contribute to Bobby finally having a father. When he arrived at the cemetery, he knelt down in front of Sarah's grave and wept softly. The silence of the mournful place gave him that opportunity in full measure. A month later, Emily and Mike picked Bobby up from the orphanage. The day was a real celebration with flowers, balloons, and a sea of sweets that were immediately given to the little caregivers. "Wow, hi, Dad, and we got a mom and a new car," the little one said in surprise. Mike smiled and looked at Emily. "Yes, son, now you'll have a new mom and I'll have a wife I love." Emily's cheeks flushed and a sly smile played on her lips. Never before in her life had she received such an exquisite marriage proposal that made her dizzy and want to cry, but not from grief, but from happiness. Change of landscapes outside the window, kaleidoscope of new faces, communication with a variety of people. This is the ride on a long-distance train. That's why a lot of people love traveling the road. But for Emily, it's a job. She is a conductor on such a train, and for her the road is a separation from her young son, taking care of passengers and troubles. Sometimes problems, sleep deprivation, but pleasure too. Of course, the clatter of wheels sometimes brought sad thoughts about her son. She longed, thinking how he was growing up without her. Where to go if you could not get a good education because of early marriage, a decent job, close to home cannot find. From the marriage left only a son and pennies alimony. I have to live on something, as there is no one to rely on. The only soulmate is Trixie's sister, but she has enough problems of her own. So most of the help is moral. So I went to the railroad. It's a good salary, and you can always work part-time. And the work is interesting, not so hard. It's not like her mom had to lay ties. That was work. So the poor woman didn't live long enough to reach 50. And the work of a conductor is nothing compared to that. And problems, well, there are problems everywhere. That's what work is. Where can you go without it? In general, their whole family was connected with the railroad. Father was a machinist, too, all over the country. So he was rarely seen at home. Mother also considered her marriage a failure, whether there is a husband or not. But my sisters loved my father. His arrival was always a holiday, but he left early too. In fact, the failed marriage, of course, had done a lot of blood to Emily Tighe, and everything else was forgivable. But the fact that the house, which his own grandmother Emily bequeathed to Emily, sued, that's what he seriously failed. I mean, she thought she was going to have a place to live. And not just a house, but a plot of land with a vegetable garden and outbuildings. How much effort she put into it. How she loved this house and her grandmother and mother-in-law. God rest her soul, before her death she said, "I bequeath everything to you, Emily, to you and your Johnny. That bastard Greg won't get anything. He'll be wasted anyway. He's such a piece of junk. He's just like his father. You'd better chase him off while you're young. You'd need a good man, and you'd be all right." And so she did, writing a will for Emily soon after the death of Greg, whom she had long suspected of cheating, in the same house, and caught Emily with his mistress. So I decided to fulfill my grandmother's wishes. Break up. I could kick him out. But he didn't. He went with some documents and certificates to shake, to prove that his grandmother, Annie Igorovna, was not in her last years, and Emily, almost with a knife to her throat, forced her grandmother to write such a will. That was my own grandmother, my late mother's mother. It is clear that she wanted to leave me the house, and this snake, while I was at work, abused my grandmother, so she forced her. And how much effort and money have I put into this house? My ex-wife only knows how to walk, so now Emily and her son had to rent an apartment, and that too without work and part-time jobs nowhere. And there was no hope to save up for some housing of their own, because you have to pay for rent and hire a nanny to look after your son while she was on a trip, not to mention the fact that you have to live on something. That's the way it is. On the next voyage, she immediately sensed that there would be trouble. At the station, a pregnant woman entered the carriage and her husband saw her off. You look, as if something did not happen, she thought unhappily, seeing how the woman's husband drags and places the luggage. In parting, he admonished his wife. "Here you go, Stacy, a separate compartment. You'll have a smooth ride. Call me as soon as you get there. Say hello to everyone for me. And here are the presents, remember what's for whom. And call me right away, don't forget." And he didn't forget to address Emily. "My wife is pregnant, as you can see. Please, please be careful. I don't know what's going on. I'll be very grateful." And he slipped a few bills into his pocket. "Thank you for that, of course. But it's the fact that Johnny's sending him out with a belly like that and no escort. He realizes that anything can happen. But he says, 'Go on, dear. Say hello. And in case of what happens, who's to blame? The conductor. They'll remember that you paid for it. Oh, those men, you put your treasure in the car and goodbye and goodbye. And if you approach them, they'll make big eyes saying, 'What's the big deal? They used to give birth in the fields. You should try it yourself, at least in the field, at least in the forest.'" Emily thought unhappily, remembering and passing the courses of guides. But what courses were there? Just a few classes, one of which talked about first aid and childbirth, but few people listened. Everyone laughed more. And the teacher herself reassured, such cases are very rare. Besides, there is bound to be at least one doctor or nurse in your carriage or in a neighboring one, so let's hope that everything will be all right for you. Let's hope so, Emily decided. The train touched down, rolling along. She looked in on a particular passenger, offered coffee or tea, asked how she was doing and feeling. "Don't worry, everything is fine. I don't need anything yet," the woman smiled. The face was indeed calm. Nothing portended trouble. Emily, having calmed down, went about her business. But could one cause for concern be dismissed? The next station added to the strangeness. Emily saw an elderly man trying to board the train. He tried one carriage, no luck, and then he got to her. Not only was he without a ticket, but he was blind. Well, you can't let the blind go without an escort. It's like everyone's conspiring today, pregnant or disabled, she thought. Clothed, obviously not very well, but clearly not a vagrant. A clean, pleasant face, about 60 years old. "I didn't have time to take a ticket, but I have money. I'll pay," he asked. "Why are you alone?" Emily asked. "I don't have anyone to escort me. I haven't had time to hire anyone either." She couldn't refuse, so she let him in. And only then did she gasp. no seats. In one compartment there were, but there was a mother with 3 children, where they could not take another one, and even a blind one. The other compartments are not the same. Her partner took her aside. "What are you doing, Emily? It's not enough that you have one pregnant woman who's about to give birth. You let this one in too." It was such a quiet flight. No drunks, no company. But no, you're just going to get in with your mercy. What if there's an inspection? Come on, if anything, blame it on me. I can't throw such a man off the train. And what a weather. Look, it's starting to rain again. Don't we have no conscience at all? How can an already unfortunate man freeze on the platform? But she quickly realized that the pregnant woman was traveling alone in the compartment, and here Grandpa is quiet, clean, calm, will sit in a corner. He can't see anything, but he won't be noticed. "Let's go," she took him by the elbow. "I'll make you comfortable." "What station are you going to?" "Who are you going to?" Grandpa named the destination, said that he was going to go on to his son. "Why doesn't he see you off?" Emily wondered. "I'll meet you there, the passenger side." "What's your name?" "Archie." "You can just call me Uncle Erich," he grinned. His face was tense, suggesting he was blind as a result of some misfortune, not born that way. Emily peeked into the compartment at the pregnant woman. "Hello again." "Ellen, sorry. I didn't recognize your middle name." "It should just be Ellen. What's the middle name?" The passenger smiled again. "I'm fine. Don't worry. The deadline hasn't come up yet. It's just that I have 2. So much for the big belly." Emily sighed to herself, but spoke of something else. "I'm sorry, Ellen, we have this thing." And she explained the problem of a blind grandfather who simply had no place to put him. "Why don't you take Archie as your traveling companion?" Ellen was even nicer than she seemed. "Yeah, sure, let him go. Do I mind? I don't think we'll be in each other's way." That's how well it all came together. They'll both get there without a problem. Matthew shouldn't worry. Grandpa's really nice. You can see he's intelligent. White, clean hands, thin fingers. Maybe he's a musician. They say blind people have good hearing, but I don't know what happened to him. It's not Emily's job to figure it out. The main thing is that she didn't take the sin on her soul, didn't leave the unfortunate man in trouble at the station. She would have suffered herself if she had refused. Everything was really quiet from then on, and in general in the carriage, and in the compartment where there were passengers, inspiring anxiety. Emily looked in on them, offered tea and snacks, but the lady had all her own, and the blind passenger politely refused everything, and indeed sat on the edge of the bunk, like a shadow. "So at least have some sweet tea. Why sit like this?" "All right, I won't refuse tea," he replied, but that was the end of all his requests. There were no stops during the night, no problems or accidents either. And Emily was about to decide that she could take a nap when some frightened girl knocked on the compartment door. "Oh, do you have a connection here?" "There is an uncle, blind, says that an ambulance is needed, or at least a doctor. Something's happened there, I didn't realize it was water." Emily had just realized what the water was. She found her partner, told him to radio the trainmaster and announced that a doctor was needed, and she herself rushed into the compartment to the pregnant woman and the blind man, inwardly lamenting, "Oh, the problem is hard. You have to go to the station. You can't wait. She'll give birth. I wish there was a doctor or someone else." And the compartment moaned, clutching the corner of the pillows with her teeth. Ellen Archie soothed her. "Don't be nervous. It doesn't happen that fast. Help will come. The main thing is to calm down and listen to me. Uncle Erich, I still have 2 weeks to walk. It hurts. Help." She looked hopefully at the guide who looked in. "It's all right. They'll make an announcement now, find a doctor, and everything will be fine. How are you doing here? Are you having contractions or something?" "Yes, but I'm afraid we won't get to the station." "A quick labor," the man said softly, soothingly. "And in the meantime, get what you need ready. Clean underwear of some sort. There's a first aid kit, isn't there?" "I've got everything. I'll get it all right away." Emily marveled at Archie's calm, confident tone. He sounded like an experienced doctor might give orders, even if he'd been a professor 3 times before. What's the use of that now? The poor guy can't see, she thought, as she took what she needed. She returned to the compartment, where things, by all appearances, were already going to labor. Now someone will come," she said confusedly, as she watched Archie's sensitive hands examine the laboring woman. "Well, while we wait, you, Emily, sanitize your hands for both you and me. Not everyone here wants to wait," he said sternly, surprising the conductor again. "Open up, it's coming soon." Alone on his feet. "And how do you know? "Are you a doctor?" asked the astonished Emily. "Yes, I used to be a surgeon, but I used to deliver babies too. Still had eyes though." "Let's try it blind. You'll have to be my eyes and hands." "Oh, Mommy, I don't know how to do anything." Emily was afraid, but she pulled herself together so she could do it. "The main thing is to listen to me." There was no doctor or anyone related to medicine in the whole train. And Emily, on shaky legs and drenched in sweat, had to deliver a baby for the first time in her life, and not a simple one. It was multi-layered. Later, Annie herself could not remember what and how she did, but there were 2 new people in the compartment, boys alive and well and screaming loudly. They were placed on the chest and belly of their mother, who in a joyful voice, forgetting pain and fear, began to give thanks. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Emily, crying loudly and laughing with happiness and relief, sat down next to her, holding the babies. She loved them so much, as if she had given birth to them herself. "It's you 2 who are my saviors. I would have died without you. 2 Badger boys, I would have given them your names." "No, you wouldn't. A boy could be Emily too. So there will be Archie and Emily," the mother said in a weak, happy voice. "Oh, what am I if it hadn't been for Uncle Erich? I couldn't have done it. I had no idea what to do," Emily sobbed. "You're a good boy, Archie. Your eyes don't see, but your hands remember everything. You must have been a good doctor." "It's been a long time," the man sighed, also wiping away a tear. The door to the compartment opened ajar. The second conductor, without going in, asked, "Well, what's up there?" "Everybody's alive." "Who was born?" Alive. We have 2 boys." "Come in and see," Emily replied. "Come on, what's there to see?" "I was afraid to pick mine up anyway. I just came by to tell you we're pulling into the station and there's an ambulance waiting. They'll take you to the hospital right away." "I won't forget you. And my husband will thank you. I'll tell everyone how you saved me and my children." Helen hurried away. "Here's my cell phone. Don't lose it. Give me yours too." "Don't worry. We're interested in how your boys will grow up," too, Emily assured her. The young mother and her children were dropped off at the station and taken to the maternity hospital. Emily gathered Archie into her compartment and poured tea. "Yes, and adventures on the road," she said. "And really, if it hadn't been for you, it would have been a disaster for Ellen and her boys. As it is, they are all alive and well. God willing, they will grow up to be good people. We'll be here soon. I live in the same town. Will your son meet you?" "I want to meet him at the cemetery. He's dead. We had an accident. He's gone. I went blind. I wish I had died right away," too, the passenger replied, pounding his fist on his knee. "Oh, that's how it is. Well, if you had died, 3 more could have died today. But you see, you're alive, so you're needed. You survived here for a reason. Since we're going to the same city, my flight's ending. I'll take you to the cemetery. Okay? Don't you have any family at all?" Emily felt sorry for this elderly and apparently very nice man in such a difficult situation. That's the thing. No one. I used to be fine. Now I wasn't just a good doctor. I had my own clinic. I was making money. I did something stupid. I married a young woman. My wife is Wolin's mother. Our son died a long time ago, and then this happened to us. Wolin was gone. I was between life and death for a long time, and then it turned out I wouldn't be able to see anymore. And while I was in that state, Yuji took over the clinic, and somehow she turned it around so that she turned all the people against me. Don't ask. I don't know how. So now all I have left is my son's grave, so I went to see him. And then, well, yes, there are people there, maybe Archie said calmly, as if he'd been through something long ago. What's the matter with you? I don't know what you're up to, but you can't do that. Emily didn't know how to comfort her new acquaintance, but she realized that he was really going through a hard time. Why don't you stay at my place for a while? Go to the cemetery, stay a while, and then we'll see. We still need to know how ours are doing. Their mom's good, Vincent, and it's good that she met you. You'd make a good medic, by the way. And don't worry, I'm not going to end my life. At least not in a way that's going to upset or scare or set anyone up. I don't listen to what I'm saying. Once in town, Emily took Archie to her place, introduced him to her son, and soon they were driving to the cemetery. On the way, he talked about Voland, who also became a doctor, worked in the clinic of his father, and gave great hopes. What a pity. He probably would have saved a lot of lives, too, Emily sighed. Yes, he followed in my footsteps, but the path was shorter, and the worst thing is that in his personal life, I think he repeated my failures in many ways, Archie sighed. He didn't get married in time, though something was going to happen, and even more than once. He wasn't young anymore, but he was secretive. I only introduced him to my first girl. It was right after high school. My mother and I were against early marriage, but they didn't really want to be together without us. They split up. I don't know why. It was the same for me. I split up with my first sweetheart, with my wife Volan's mom. I lived like that, out of obligation, for my son's sake, and so that I wouldn't be alone. Then she died, and I got involved with that old fool Eugenie, and I was alone. That's what I should do. The cemetery, of course. Emily helped Archie find the grave. She led him to a bench. I'll be out of your way. You sit here and talk to him, and I'll be right over here. When you get up, we'll go, she said. Thank you, Vincent. What would I do without you? I don't know, Archie answered. Emily stepped back and wandered between the graves, reading the inscriptions on the monuments and wiping away tears. She felt sorry for the lonely old man. Pity for those who lay beneath the ground, and for those who left inscriptions on the stone to testify to their grief. Glancing from time to time at Archie's slumped form, she suddenly noticed that a boy, small like her son, was coming up behind him. Well, that is, about 6 or 7 years old. In his hands he held an inexpensive bunch of artificial flowers. The man must have heard his footsteps and looked back. Emily also hurriedly approached and heard the conversation. Who is here? Grandfather asked. No, I'm Erich, said the boy. I just came to visit the grave. That's right. That's my dad. Who's that? Archie put his hand on the monument. Yeah, that's what my mom told me. We used to come here together. Can't you see it at all? Did you come to see him too? The little boy asked with childish curiosity. I am his daddy. Where's your mom, and who is she? What's her name? My mom's name is Maggie, but she's in jail now, and I was in an orphanage and escaped. And since you're my daddy's daddy, that makes you my grandfather. Why don't you take me out of the orphanage? I can live with you and help you. Tears were ringing in the child's voice. Emily, her heart breaking with pity at the scene, came closer and asked, What's going on here, Vincent? I don't know. I think I found my grandson Archie, replied Maggie. Yeah, I remember my son had a girl like that, but I never saw her. All I heard was them talking on the phone. And then I don't know what happens next. I don't know how to make sense of it all. Is it really true? What am I supposed to do with all this? Archie was confused. Emily was, too. She shifted her gaze from the boy to the photograph of the dead young man and saw that there was a resemblance, but it would be premature to draw any conclusions from that alone. And anyway, what could be done with all this? So well, friends, let's go home and tell each other all about it. And I'm getting a little cold standing here too. You're not dressed for the weather, Erich, said Emily. I ran away from the orphanage in the summer. They didn't give me a jacket then, the boy said cheerfully. Was it that bad in the orphanage? Did they insult you? Everyone cares about you. Now you'd stay warm and go to school, Emily wondered. It's bad. I don't want to live there. I don't go to school, I can't go. I already know a lot, and I can count as much as I want, and read, and in general. But I don't want to go to the orphanage. It's disgusting. Erich frowned and turned the conversation away. Grandfather, how do you go if you can't see? Well, I do not sit all day. I have a cane, see? I know where I can step, and where I shouldn't. And now Aunt Emily's still around. Aunt Emily doesn't have enough to worry about. Now she's got you. Emily thought, who really had little idea how she would be with her grandfather and grandson. She has to go on trips. And where would those go? The boy to the orphanage, so he'll run away again. The grandfather, even if it is possible to prove that they are related people. The guardianship, of course, will not give. He himself needs a guardian. In short, she takes on an impossible burden. But at least a few days will stay. She'll dress them up. She has extra clothes. The boy seemed to guess her thoughts, and as they approached the house, he tugged at her sleeve. Aunt Emily, will you help me and Grandpa? I'd like to live with him. I'll try, buddy. I just don't know what I can do, she said. Archie understood her concern, too. He sighed heavily, realizing that there was little he could do to help a lonely woman with a lot of problems of her own. At home, Emily introduced the boys, sat the guests at the table, fed them. She listened to the guest's story about being an orphan. My mom and I had a good life. I'm telling you the truth. We had a nice apartment. I even had my own room, and my mom had her own. She worked and got money, and we had everything. And then some people came. My mom said they were liars. They took the apartment and said something about my mom, that she was a criminal, so they took her away. And when we said goodbye, she promised she'd come back and that I'd wait for her. She also told me not to believe she was a criminal. That's it. And when was that, Erich? Emily asked. I don't remember much. I was 4 years old, and now I'm 6. So you remember your daddy then? Archie asked. Not well. He used to come over and give us toys, and then my mom told me he was dead. We used to go to the cemetery with her. I remembered. Yes, the boy's memory was not bad, but in legal matters, what could he understand even now, even 2 years ago? Emily sighed heavily. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with all this. Do you remember your address? Erich. I would go there, ask something. How? Oh, there's no point, Archie replied. The new owners must have the apartment. That's all it is, black realtors. I should know better than to know I'd been ripped off by one of those guys. Maggie, too. I don't know why Wolin never told me anything about her and her son. Only Maggie herself can tell me that the old man pondered. You'll get my mom out of jail. It's really not her fault. Honestly, tears welled up in Erich's eyes. We understand. Baby Emily stroked his head. I'm going to go look at the apartment, see if I can find out anything from the neighbors. I think we should go to other people, Archie said firmly. Ellen, this is the woman who gave birth. She said she was grateful that her husband would always help her. I don't like to ask for gratitude, and I don't like to demand gratitude for services rendered, but this is a special case. Do you think there's anything he can do to help? Emily asked. I have no idea. But we don't even know what kind of person he is, where he works. Maybe just a rich businessman. But we don't need the money. Well, maybe he's influential in some areas. Can he at least help us find out how Maggie got locked up and what happened to the apartment? Or at least tell us who to go to? Is there anything we can do on our own? What are we now? We're nobody. So, do you still have the phone numbers Ellen gave you? All right, let's call her, tell her what our problems are. Emily dialed Ellen's number, but the phone was silent. Well, obviously she's still in the hospital with 2 babies. No conversation at all. Only in the evening did she manage to contact her casual acquaintance, on whom she had pinned so much hope, only to be completely disappointed. It's okay, Ellen said in a sad, downcast tone. The kids are fine. So am I, but I'm thinking of divorcing my husband. Why? Why all of a sudden? I thought things were going well between you two. Oh, it wasn't fine. Is it good when a husband sends his pregnant wife on a train? I've been thinking about it here at the hospital. Why did he do that? Didn't he realize that I might die? That the children might not survive? Lucky you and Archie were there. What if I hadn't? Is that what you think now? Is he sitting next to me, begging for forgiveness or something? No, he hasn't even been here once. He's got things to do, you see. So I told him, mind your own business and I'll mind my own. And she cried. But why so wide open? Emily tried to reason with her. There must be an explanation for everything. He has a million explanations, but it doesn't make me feel any better. And anyway, we had a fight. I told him I was going to name the kids after you, and he didn't want to do it. He said he wanted to name them after our fathers, Igor and Victor. And he said it was wrong to name a boy after a girl. She's probably right about that. Archie has a grandson named Erich after him. Maybe they'll name a granddaughter after me. I can't fight with my husband over something like that.
Yes, you laugh. But Ellen was very serious and was not going to make up with her husband.
So it was even awkward to address her with her requests in such a case. Well then, that hope is gone, Emily realized. Since this husband was no longer in Ellen's life, he was hardly going to help us. And why should he? It's not like it's just some sum of money. The next day, seeing no other way out, she went to the address that Erich had given her, to his former apartment. Emily didn't know what she wanted to find there. Emily just wanted to look into the eyes of the people who had taken away the only place to live from a single mother and her son, and who were probably responsible for her imprisonment. She hoped to learn at least some details that might help with Maggie's release. After all, if she had to ask for help from powerful people, it was better to know the ins and outs of the case. Should I talk to the neighbors or something? She thought. But what she found out was completely unexpected. The door to the apartment was opened at her call by none other than Greg, her ex-husband. Emily? Is this where you found me? He said with a mocking smile. What do you want from me now? Is the alimony too low again? Or what? What are you doing in this apartment? How did you get in here? I got here the right way. I walked in the door, and now this is my apartment. I sold my grandmother's house. You know, I don't want to be in the garden. Now I'm a city dweller. What do you want from me? I need to know how you got this apartment. You took the house from me and my son, and now another woman has it, and you put her in jail. How did you do it? Why do you want to know? As an exchange of experience, tired of serving tea and coffee to passengers and dirty laundry for the third time to sell people, her ex-husband continued to mock her. This and the other woman should not flap their ears. Think about themselves and their child. Now let her sit, think. And a little such is not harmful. I may be tired of being a conductor, but I've never framed other people, and I never will. And I didn't set you up. But it wouldn't hurt to bring her out in the open. Remember that. Emily turned around and left, not really knowing how she could fulfill her threat. Of course, you could report it to the police, but while they're sorting it out. With such sad news, Emily went home, thinking about what to do next, and on whom she would leave the blind grandfather and his little grandson, while she herself will be on a voyage. If she asked for a nanny, she'd ask for twice as much money, which she didn't have. And if she called Trixie's sister, she'd probably refuse to do her own thing, too. There was still hope that Archie would think of something. After all, he hadn't always just been a blind invalid. He'd worked in a clinic once, probably saved someone's life. He must have had some acquaintances who may have heard some bad things about him, but they'd still remember him as someone who'd helped. But she had no time to tell the news at home. As soon as Emily entered the room, there was a phone call from Ellen this time. She was much more cheerful. Emily, hello. Excuse me, please. You called last time, probably to say something, and I started complaining to you instead. But you're not angry, are you? Of course I'm not angry, Eleanor, but I understand your problems have been solved. You and your husband are reconciled, Emily rejoiced. We have. He explained everything to me. Turns out he was building a house, and he decided to finish it completely so that I and the children could move there from the maternity hospital. So now we're in a new house. You could call it a palace. Vincent's with me right now. He'll talk to you. He wants to thank you and Archie too. He's with you. Yeah, our doctor's here. There's a man on the phone. Hello. Emily, this is Vincent Timofeyevich. Can I call you Vincent? I'm the husband. Ellen told me everything. I can't tell you how grateful I am. The doctors at the hospital said it went exceptionally well. Even they couldn't have done better. You have really good hands, and that Archie too.
Oh no. We couldn't leave a woman without help, but all the credit goes to him. He's the doctor. I'm just an assistant. He told me what to do, and I listened to him, Emily explained.
And you did a wonderful job helping my babies come into the world. Thank you so much. I'd really like to meet you both and see if there's anything you need. You know, you can't let something like that go unappreciated. I was just calling. I'm sorry. But that's exactly why Emily said, struggling to find the words, you see. We need help, not money, not material help. I'd like to ask if there are any good lawyers among your acquaintances. Maybe lawyers or, I don't know, someone else. Because Archie and his grandson are in serious trouble. Of course, I'll find you any kind of professional help you need, free of charge. Don't worry about that, Ellen's husband assured her seriously. But it is necessary to meet to find out more about what is bothering you. Emily gave her address and told him when she could be at home. And Archie's staying with me now, too. So we're all here. Oh, and my wife told me she wanted to name the kids after you. And don't even think about it. What's the big deal? Don't worry about it. I think Ellen's changed her mind, too. Vincent arrived the same evening with a lawyer. He listened to the whole story of both the boy and Archie. Apparently, the boy's mother was victimized by the same con artist we've been looking for. Now we'll have something to go on. Don't worry, they'll be held accountable for what they've done. I just wish we could figure out why Maggie went to juvie. I don't think she really did anything wrong. We'll figure that out, too. Once we've started, we've got to keep going. Don't worry. It's a complicated case, but we'll solve it, because there are plenty of victims out there. You're saying your ex-husband was involved? The lawyer was asking around. He was. He also took away the house from me and my son, which our grandmother bequeathed to us. It was obviously illegal, but I couldn't prove anything. I don't know enough, and I don't have any connections. And he brought in some man, apparently with an education. So my son and I were left without a roof over our heads. By the way, my son needs to go to school and to the clinic. Do not worry. Everything will be done according to the law, said the lawyer. And the case began. An additional investigation was launched into why a woman with a young child had her apartment taken away and why she had been convicted. And this time the law was on the side of the deceived. Emily's ex-husband was on trial. Of course, the house could not be returned, It has long been sold, but she was able to get the money for it. But Erich and his mom got their apartment back. And Maggie herself was also released from prison. After a review of the case, it turned out that her accusation was completely false. And soon the happy mother was already hugging her son and thanking Emily and her father-in-law. How could it be, Maggie, Archie asked. And why didn't I know anything about you or Erich? Volan and I had a fight. It was a silly excuse, of course, but it couldn't be helped. It was a big fight, so we broke up. It was my fault, too. I loved him, but I couldn't help myself. I was so worried about it. And then I found out that Volan had died. But even then, it was too late to contact you. Besides, I was embarrassed. You were a serious man then, a rich owner of a clinic. I had no education, no profession. I thought I'd come to you after Volan's death and you'd just kick me out. You'd think I was some kind of fraud, but I'm not. The son is really his. I almost left Erich an orphan because of some stupidity. Archie said reproachfully. What's wrong with your arm? He gently felt his sister-in-law's elbow. Yes, I worked at a sawmill in prison. I made a big mess of it. At first I thought it was nothing and there was no one to treat it, but when I turned to them, they said it would be fine. Anyway, my arm doesn't hurt much. It just can't bend all the way, she said. Probably surgery can be done and everything will not be so difficult, said the former doctor. I don't really care about my arm or anything else. The main thing is that I'm home, that Erich is with me, and we have a place to live. Maybe you'll move in with us. Please, Archie. You're the closest thing we have to family now. Oh, this is awkward. There's not much choice, though, Grandpa said. There's nowhere to live. All I have left after my wife's shenanigans is a room in a communal apartment. It's almost impossible to live there. The neighbors won't let me. And isn't your lawyer, who solved my case so cleverly, will not help? How can you be so traumatized and left with nothing? I don't know, Maggie. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. That's the last thing on my mind today. I'm happy. I've got my grandson, I've got you. And if you can find a corner in your apartment, that'd be great, and I won't be redundant. That's for sure. I think I'll find a job, and you'll be very useful to us. Look after my grandson. Look, Archie grinned. Oh, I'm sorry, it's just a habit. I mean, at least you'll be around. It's like a child without supervision. Well, Maggie was embarrassed. Erich and I are real friends now, Archie reassured her.
And with us, too, with me and Gianni, Emily reminded him.
We're not blood relatives, but we're not strangers to each other. And you, Maggie, if you're looking for a job, why don't you come to us as a conductor? We need people all the time. It's not the easiest job in the world, but it's good money. I'd love to. You know, I've been in this damn prison so much. It'd do me good to travel now. That's good, of course. But I tell you, Emily, you'd make a great medic, said Archie. Oh, I wouldn't be a medic. Not unless you're always there to tell me what to do. But in general, I listen to you. I read books on first aid. I don't have time to learn much, but in case of emergency, I won't sit idly by when someone helps me with something. I can do a lot of things myself. Things happen on the road. But before Maggie could get a job, she had to sort out her hand. She was referred for surgery. But it was more complicated than first thought. She stayed in the hospital a little longer than she expected. Emily visited her, and one day, to her amazement, saw on the nightstand a picture of her father next to a woman and a little girl on his lap. Who are those people? She asked. Where did you get that picture? How could I? It's me as a little girl. Didn't you recognize me? Those are my parents, Maggie replied. They're dead now, but I always carry the picture with me. That can't be. That's my father, Emily exclaimed. And when you were born, it turned out there wasn't that much difference in their ages. Maggie had always lived in this town. Emily grew up in the country. I have an older sister, Trixie, also his daughter. I don't see how it could be that he's yours and ours, Emily wondered. It's very simple, I think, said Maggie. He worked on the railroad and traveled all the time. He must have been staying at your place or ours for 2 families. It happens. Yeah, I'll say. That's our daddy, and I never knew it. My mom must have known. I've heard them fight about it. Sometimes Emily remembered. Well, you see, mine used to resent him for coming so seldom and for being away so long. I wonder, Maggie wondered. So suddenly it turned out that they really are sisters by father. Maggie met Trixie, her husband and 2 children, so it was quite a family. Meanwhile, the fate of Archie and Erich was decided. They were able to prove their kinship, and the grandfather settled Lucy at his failed daughter-in-law. Nor was the acquaintance of Helen and Vincent and their sons Viti and Gorko, with whose help they came into the world, interrupted. It was interesting to watch the little ones grow up. The mutual appreciation of the adults made it hard to forget each other. Maggie recovered, got a job as a conductor, and they began to travel together with Emily. They became real sisters, and when they finished their business, often told each other about their fates. They both had much to share. They also had something to complain to their family. Maggie had never had any sisters, and Emily and Trixie didn't see each other as often as they would have liked in their spare time. Emily had finished her home nursing course, after all, and was now considered prepared for the unexpected that could happen on the road. On one of the flights, a company of businessmen became passengers. Emily didn't like it right away. Always with this public, some kind of trouble happens. They complain about something without any reason, or demand something. I guess they compare the train to their own office. But what can you do? You can't just drop them off. This time it was not without difficulties. At first the businessmen behaved quite calmly, young and decent people. It is obvious that they are well-to-do and not in need of anything. They refused tea and closed themselves in their compartment, solving some questions. Suddenly one of them burst into the compartment of the conductor. "Girl, I need a doctor urgently. Do you have any doctors on the train?" "There's a man in there feeling bad, suffocating. I don't know. We'll have to make an announcement." "What's wrong?" Emily asked. "Who cares what? You're not a doctor, are you?" The passenger became indignant. "I'm not a doctor, but I can administer first aid." She firmly pushed the petitioner away. Taking the first aid kit, she hurried to his compartment. "They'll call a doctor right away. Don't worry." "I don't know what's wrong with him." He drank some medicine, suddenly entering the compartment. Emily noticed the serious swelling on the young man's face and quickly realized everything. An anaphylactic shock. An allergy, apparently. "What's the drug?" "Where did he get it?" she asked, preparing a syringe.
Wherever he needed it, where he got it, the doctor found it. "What are you going to inject him with? I'm telling you to call an ambulance," scandalized the victim's companion.
"Please calm down. My partner has already called everyone, and I know what to do." Emily quickly administered an injection and gave the injured man the necessary first aid. The passenger was rescued and regained consciousness rather quickly. "Thank you, Savior," he said as he shook Emily's hand. "That's a little something like that. I'll pay you for it, and I'll pay you back too. Chuck, you're the one who slipped me this." He turned to his partner.
"What did I slip you?" "You took something yourself. I don't know if you can or can't. You like to blame others."
Yeah, the story was almost criminal. His partner, a competitor of the businessman, gave him headache medicine that he couldn't take. What did he know? Well, he also knew that an allergic reaction can kill you, and that might well have happened if Emily hadn't been there. "Thank you. You just saved me." The injured man shook her hand. "So are you a doctor too, or what?" No, I'm a conductor, but I graduated from nursing school, so I know roughly what happened to you." "It's no big deal, really. It's really good that I happened to be around," Emily said, putting the medication away. "You just see your doctor. He'll help you out. I don't think you'll need anything else, though." "I know, it's happened to me before. Allergies are a scary thing, really, and the one who triggered it, Chuck, you might say is a companion, but really a competitor. Apparently that's how he wants to eliminate me." "Can you give a reference as to what caused all this to happen?" the man asked.
"How can I give it if I'm not a doctor?" Emily replied. "I can testify, of course. Are you going to sue him, though?"
"I don't know yet. I actually want to break up with him. I mean, kick him out before some more serious trouble happens, although it wouldn't hurt to punish him for that sort of thing. It's a hell of a way to go. I don't want to get involved, of course, but it wouldn't hurt to tell everyone what Chuck's done. Let everyone be careful with him." "Well, that's right. I won't argue. People like that are generally best kept away." They talked some more. Emily noticed that the passenger's condition had stabilized and went about her business. When the businessman was getting ready to get off at his station, he approached her again, bade her farewell, offered her money for her help, but she, of course, relented, and even felt a little hurt by such an offer. Although she liked this young man, she did not think at all that their acquaintance would continue. For the next few days, she was thoughtful and distracted, and Maggie, who worked with her, was even surprised. "I don't recognize you. Always so cheerful, so active. And now you're walking around like you're in the water," her sister told her. "I don't know what's wrong with me. You know, after Greg and I broke up, I didn't really pay much attention to anyone. Well, it's not like I'm still in love with the ex. No, it's not. I even hate him after the shit Jennifer did to us. But I don't really like or trust other men either. I don't even like these road trips. They don't do any good. I've seen all sorts of things. You know, there are such conductors, and among ours, too, who on every voyage choose some man and imagine it's love. I'll never do that, Emily tried to explain her mood. And I'm not going to either. And anyway, you have to separate work and personal life. Otherwise, take our father, for example. How do we know if he only lied to our moms or if he lied somewhere else along the way? There are families with kids. I just don't understand what you're saying. Did you fall in love with someone? Maggie wondered. Oh, I don't know myself. There's this guy, but I can't figure out what it is. I think about him all the time. And he got off at his station, and that's all. I don't even know where he lives, if I can meet him. Well, at least a glimpse of him. And so sad about it, Emily admitted. But I'm definitely in love. But that's a good thing, Vincent. I'd love to be in love too, but I just can't seem to do it, Maggie sighed. Strangely enough, as she finished her shift and stepped off the train, Emily saw Hercule with a bouquet of flowers. He noticed her too and walked over. Found out when you were finishing work and thought I'd meet you and thank you. You don't have to. Thank you for the beautiful flowers, though. It's been a while since anyone's given them. Emily brightened. You're not married. No, divorced, and I have a child. He's 6, admitted Emily, who had no intention of hiding anything. You must be very tired. Hurry home to your son. I won't keep you, but I'll walk you home, and let's meet tomorrow. I'll invite you to a restaurant or anywhere else you want to go. It was obvious that he was a little shy, but he spoke sincerely. You know, I'd really like to go out. I don't really care where, as long as it's just for a walk. Maybe just down the street, Emily suddenly blurted out, determined not to be modest this time. It was not, of course, a confession of affection, but still, maybe he would realize that he had not left her indifferent. Hercule seemed to guess it, for he was glad of it. He accompanied Emily home, and they made arrangements for tomorrow's meeting, and she was welcomed home by a happy, bored Kieran, who had his own plans for tomorrow with his mom. I so wish you weren't going anywhere already, said the son. Why don't you get some other job so you can leave in the morning and always come in the evening, like all moms do? I'm bored without you. I'll try, buddy. Emily kissed him, who also wanted to find another place. It was so hard for her to leave her son alone for long periods of time. I'll definitely think about it. Will you let me go tomorrow night? I have a little business there. I'd really like to get away for a while. Again, the son was upset. But it's not enough that you're gone all day long. You're going to leave in the evening. I could hardly wait. I have so much to tell you. Why don't you take me with you? Emily was upset too. She realized she was depriving her child of her own company, and that was a bad thing. But what could she do? She wanted to see Hercule. In the evening, she called Maggie and told her about the date for tomorrow. Her sister was delighted. There, I told you you'd be together. Vincent, it's fate. It's their destiny. But I guess I'll have to call him now and turn him down. Kieran misses me so much. He wants to be with me. I can't abandon the baby for my love life. It's not right, don't you agree? Did you tell your beau that you have a son? Then you could have arranged it so that you all go to some playground together or something else. The child would feel good, and so would you. Oh, I don't know if Hercule would agree. He wants to meet me and I want to meet the baby. That's not right either, Emily hesitated. You know, if his intentions are serious, it won't scare him. And if he just wants to have fun, why would you want to do that? Well, or invite him over to your house. Then spend time all together, and he'll see how you live, what kind of hostess you are. You know, you're probably right. I'm going to call him and tell him I can't leave my son, Emily said firmly. And so she did. She called, apologized, and explained that she and her son missed each other too much and couldn't bear to part ways. Maybe some other time, she suggested gently, afraid that Hercule would hang up now. But he took it with complete understanding. Yes, of course. Somehow I hadn't thought of that. Would you like to keep me company? The 3 of us could go out. I think there's a nice kids' cafe in the neighborhood. Emily was ready to dance with joy. She had never expected to find such an understanding and kind man who was willing to spend time not only with her, but also with her child. Of course we'd love to, she said. That day of the first date went just fine. All 3 were happy and had no doubt that their meeting would not be their last. Hercule seemed to be quite serious. He himself had brought up the idea that it would be a good idea for Emily to learn another profession so that she wouldn't have to go far and long. I don't know yet. I'm really not good at anything else after all, and I'm not educated. I've only got courses in conductors and nursing, and with courses they won't take me very far, she explained. Why not? You've got to find out first. Maybe it's all quite real. To work as a nurse, let's say, just in the treatment room, you do bandages, right? You give shots too. He saved me, Hercule was saying. But maybe, if only so, she answered doubtfully. All relatives and acquaintances supported her. Maggie, who had grown tired of the romance of long-distance travel rather quickly, was also not against it. Honestly, it's not for us. This job is not for moms. We'll be constantly on the road. We won't notice how our sons will grow up. And it's good if they grow up right, in the sense of good people. You know what happens to kids who are left unsupervised. Erich communicates with street children and says that it is not the best company, and many become such not because the parents died or for some other serious reasons. A lot of them have a mom and a dad. They just don't have time for kids, so they just hang around doing nothing. I'm thinking of going to school too, but of course not to study medicine, but something else. Maybe an accountant, Maggie reasoned. Emily and Hercule's relationship was developing. The young man had already become his own not only in her house, but also got acquainted with all her family. He was already perceived by everyone as a fiancé. Relations with Jennifer, he had a great relationship, and the matter was steadily moving towards the wedding. On the engagement of the whole family was invited to the restaurant. In front of everyone, Hercule handed her favorite bouquet, put on her finger ring, and asked to become his wife. The consent was met with applause. "How I envy you," said Maggie. "I want a love story like that too. Shall I travel some more? I'll meet my fate too." Actually, Maggie had already finished her accounting courses, and she'd been accepted for an internship with the company. She decided that a sedentary lifestyle was preferable for her with a child and a blind grandfather, so the words about continuing to travel were more of a joke, and her sister assured her that fate would find her at home. And so it happened that very evening in the restaurant. One of Hercule's friends noticed Maggie and asked her to dance, then on a date, and soon between them also began a relationship that led to the wedding, which occurred 6 months after the marriage of Hercule and Emily. Emily was not only a guest, but also a witness. Everyone said pregnant witness at the wedding. A guarantee of a strong family, and Emily had been expecting her second child for 6 months.
"Oh, Selena, look how handsome John is," Betty told her friend. She was 6 months pregnant herself. Spit, her friend looked at her. Laughed Beatty. "That's good." The girl lifted her son in her arms and kissed him. "You're so superstitious." Betty always knew that. "God protects him," Selena said. They had been friends since high school, and now that they had both graduated and married, one was already a mother and the other was just getting ready. "Where are they?" Betty looked at her watch. "I don't know, they should be here by now," she shrugged. Today was their special day. It was on this date that Betty and Selena had met their husbands. Yes, Harry and Carlos were friends. They'd been walking the streets of the city like girls, and apparently, as fate would have it, they'd met two friends. Since then, exactly 5 years had passed. They played weddings 1 month apart. At first, they wanted it to be on the same day, but then the girls changed their minds. And today they gathered to celebrate a small anniversary of their acquaintance, waiting only for their husbands. "Are they knocking?" Betty looked at her friend when she heard a sound. "I don't know, go look. Carlos has keys." She looked toward the front door. Betty got up and went to open it. Indeed, there were young men standing on the landing with so many bags in their hands that they couldn't even knock properly. "Wow, Harry, she can feel you even through the doors." Carlos looked at his friend. "Come on, we were just scraping by." They entered the apartment. "Where are you going?" The girls looked at the huge bags. "Now we'll get everything ready and sit at the table." Her husband did not answer her question. And he and Carlos really went into the kitchen, closed the doors, told the wives to wait a little. They looked at each other and quietly went into the room. That's the way it always was. Betty and Selena were very good guys. They were always in charge. The wives just had to be there for them and love them. Well, that was it. An hour later, Harry came out of the kitchen. He and his friend had dragged a large table to the middle of the room and began carrying the dishes they had just prepared themselves onto it. "Boys, did you really do all this yourselves?" Betty marveled at it every time. Enough already. Her husband kissed her on the cheek. They sat down at the table. Everything looked delicious. Carlos poured wine into glasses. "We thought of you too." The young man smiled and pulled another bottle from under the table. "You what?" "I'm nursing and Beatty's pregnant," Selena told him immediately. "It's non-alcoholic." hubby parried. Good, then let's have it. She set up 2 glasses. It was so family-friendly, the friends sat around, reminiscing about everything they had, how they met, what they talked about, and the rest. I feel sick. Betty covered her mouth with the palm of her hand. Hurry up. Harry took her hand. She didn't return to the table again. In the evening, the couple went home. I don't believe there is such a friendship, Betty said to her husband in the evening. How can it be? Because we have one. He looked surprised. Yes, I realized that, but still, she was silent. But it was true. In all the years of their friendship, neither the boys among themselves, nor the girls, nor their families had ever quarreled. There had been a few misunderstandings, but never a big fight. Are you going out? Selena called her friend. I can't, it's my stomach, she admitted. You need to go to the hospital, the girl worried. She was silent, counting what Betty's due date was. I'd already thought about it, but I want to wait for Caustic, she said, but she was in pain. When are you due? Selena finally asked. In 3 days, clutched Betty. She was already sitting down. It hurt so much. Urgently, call an ambulance, her friend advised. Okay, there was silence on the other end of the phone. BT, Selena shouted, but there was silence in response. The girl crouched down in the hallway. She could hear her name being called from the tube, but there was nothing she could do. She couldn't even inhale or exhale. The pain was so intense. A key was inserted into the keyhole. The girl turned around. Harry entered the apartment. He was in a good mood. He saw his wife on the floor. Everything immediately changed. He realized that he needed to go to the hospital. Now, love, 1 minute. He ran to the phone and dialed 911. Help! She held out her hand to him, but he didn't. He just walked over and lifted her into his arms. Everything was ready. All that was left was to wait for the paramedics. They arrived. Harry carried his wife to the car. They took her to the hospital. The young man wanted to go with them, but they wouldn't let him. They wouldn't let him in the hospital anyway. She was already in the labor room. There were doctors all around. Come on, honey. Soon you'll be a mom, the midwife commanded her. There was a baby crying in the room. Betty looked at the baby and cried too. She was now the mother of the most beautiful baby girl, Lucy. She took her tiny hand as she lay on her chest. Congratulations, the doctor whispered in her ear. Thank you. The girl lay there, somewhere in the distance, still feeling the pain that had just been so intense that it hurt to even remember. After that, she was transferred to the ward, and Harry was already standing outside the window, waiting for his daughter to be shown to him. Look, it's your daddy. She brought the little bundle to the window, and my husband just cried. He shouted words of gratitude and wiped his tears. That made 6 of us. Her friends and her husband greeted her after she was discharged. Yes, we'll become relatives, laughed the girl's mother. I don't mind, Carlos said. They went home and decided to organize a small table. Lucy was a quiet child. After she was fed, she fell asleep and let her parents spend a few hours with their friends. John was a little over a year old. The boy was curious about who was brought in and put in the crib. He stood looking at his future girlfriend. Why Lucy? Selena asked. I don't know, looked at her and realized that's what she was going to be called. Betty turned to her husband. It's okay, it's a great name. He kissed her hands. After a brief sit down, the friends left, leaving the young parents alone with the baby. Lucy was growing up, as on the first day she was very quiet, not crying much, only at night when it was feeding time. Now Selena and Betty were walking together in the park with their strollers. We should get together, Selena suggested. Yes, her friend agreed with her. They were visiting with Betty and Harry. The friends were sitting on the couch watching John and Lucy discussing something on their own. The girl was still so young that she was babbling incomprehensible things, but the boys seemed to understand everything. Let them grow up together, and then they'll be together too. Carlos couldn't get enough of the children's play. I don't mind, Selena said, just as she had at the maternity ward. Neither do we, Harry turned to her. That's how the boys grew up, always close by. John went to daycare late. He was practically 3 years old. Betty had tried to find a place for Lucy too. Now the boy and the girl were in the same garden. Their mothers picked them up every day, and they walked home together. When it was time to go to school, Selena would not put John with her stream. They waited a year, and the kids walked to September 1 together. "We did it," cheered the moms as their kids walked to class with their teacher. Yes, they hugged. From that moment on, John and Lucy became inseparable. They sat at the same desk, went everywhere together. They were even teased as bride and groom. "How are you doing at school?" a mother would ask her daughter when she got home. "Not you, but you," the girl told her. She was in the 7th grade. "Good. How are you doing in school?" smiled the woman. She was pleased that they had once made the right choice. John was sticking up for Lucy now. He loved her and would never let her get hurt. "Everything is fine. Today I talked to Selena. He said that after school we'll get married right away," blushed the girl. "Where are you in a hurry ahead of the whole life?" Did not understand the mother, but did not have anything against it. They gathered with friends, the children together, they too. "You know what my daughter said to me today?" They were sitting around the table again. "We know. John pleased us too," laughed Selena. The husbands looked at each other. They too were supportive of the children. School was going great. The boy and girl didn't have to run anywhere. They often spent time at home. "Exams are coming up. Have you prepared?" Betty came into the room. "Of course," turned at the same time, guys. "Good, I believe in you." She walked out and they were alone again. At prom, everyone was together again. "Remember standing here with you when our boys went to 1st grade?" whispered Selena to Betty. "Of course, it seems like yesterday to me." The woman brushed away a tear. "And now we're already seeing them off," sighed the other. "Nothing. I believe that everything will be fine." Their husbands joined them. That's how it was. When the official part was over and the graduates went to greet the dawn, John asked for silence on the bus. Everyone looked at him in surprise and fell silent. "Lucy," he knelt in the aisle by her seat, "will you marry me?" The classmates applauded. Some started whistling and hooting. "Of course I will." She hugged him and took the ring. John stood up. He hugged Lucy. Ever since he was a little boy, this boy knew that she would be his one and only and his favorite. They reached the place. Everything was calm and Jacoptic. The boys separated from the big company and spent time alone. "Look," showed the girl the ring to her mom in the morning. "Guys, why in silence? Why did not tell us anything?" She took Lucy's hand and looked closer at the jewelry. "I do not know," John so decided. "Probably today we will gather," modestly answered the daughter. "Okay, I'll go call Selena." The mother walked down the hallway and smiled. Everything was just as they wanted it to be. The families gathered together. They congratulated their children and rejoiced that they would soon be relatives. "Well, shall we go?" Lucy looked at her lover. It was only a few days before their wedding and they had a lot to do. "Yes," nodded the boy. Everyone was busy with business. Lucy had taken her entrance exams only a week ago. John hadn't joined her. He was due to serve in the army. The wedding was in the last days of August. After that, Lucy started to prepare for her studies. John received a summons. It was not very happy news, but the guy did not show any sign. "How am I here without you?" She snuggled up to her husband in the evening. They were sitting at home in front of the TV. "Lucy, you're at it again." He was nervous. "What's the big deal if I'm worried?" She looked up at her lover. "You think I'm not worried?" They talked about it every day, so the topic got a little tiresome. John, for some time before the draft, came to the same city where the girl studied. He didn't want to live away from his wife. "Will you come with me? Or by the weekend we'll be at your parents'?" asked her boyfriend, when before his departure was only a few days. "Of course, I will go." She did not understand his question, because she loved him so much that she was ready to go to the army. The girl wrote a statement so that she would not be lost in her studies. The reason was serious, so no one would not interfere. Selena and Betty were crying. The fathers just kept silent. Friends gathered around the table, all raising their glasses and doing something. Dismissed early, Lucy and John went into the room. "Will you wait?" He looked at the girl. "Why do you ask?" "Of course." "Yes." She kissed him. Tears rolled down from her eyelashes by themselves. Lucy couldn't help it. In the morning at the train station, she stood and stared blankly at the departing train. "Don't worry, daughter. Time will pass quickly. We will support you." Her mother-in-law hugged her. "Thank you." She turned away and walked away. Now the girl wanted only one thing: to go with her head into study, to do something, only if the hours and weeks would pass faster. "Daughter, maybe you should move temporarily to a dormitory. Why spend money on rented accommodation?" Her mother asked her. "Yes, I also thought about it. There are girls there. Everything will not be so sad in the evenings. Lucy has already packed things for the move." "Good, you're a good girl." The woman hugged her. John wrote often. In his letters he described where he was, what they were doing there. Lucy answered him with the same frequency. "Why are you always sitting here like a mouse in a hole?" The roommate came in after a walk. "I'm studying." She pointed to her notes. "I'm also studying, but you don't need to wave your hand at yourself. Come with us tomorrow. You'll have a good time," she suggested to her. "I don't know what my husband will say." She looked at the sealed envelope that was to be sent tomorrow. "I think he'll be all for it." Julia sat down on her bed. "Okay, we'll see tomorrow," Lucy agreed. The next day in the evening, she and a few other girls went for a walk around town. They decided to sit for a while in the recreation area, which was in the very center. There was a fountain, of course. At this time of year it was not working, and a few benches, their girlfriends unoccupied. "Why did you get married so early?" Julia asked the girl. "I don't know, John wanted it that way," she answered. "It is clear that nothing is clear," she laughed. Lucy heard the girl and looked around. She didn't know who knew her. "Archie," she saw her classmate. "How are you here?" He came over, with a few other kids with him. "I'm studying." "Why are you here and not in the army?" "John's gone." She motioned for the boy to sit down. "And I got in. I have a deferment." He looked at the girls. He remembered that he was not alone. "I see. But my husband didn't want to," she said sadly. "Oh yes, he's your husband." Archie remembered the proposal and the wedding. Yes, she noticed that the young men had approached the girls and were now getting acquainted. "There's nothing to be bored of," the young man said cheerfully. "Come with us. It'll be fun." "It probably won't work tonight." Lucy turned to Julia, looking to her for support. "Why not? The time is still childish. We'll have time for everything." The neighbor was already sitting next to the guy. "Okay." The girl was not worried. Archie was a normal guy. He would not give her offense. That evening they went to the young men's apartment. They rented it for everyone. The guys quickly organized the table. Funny dishes started to appear on it. Wine, melted cheese, bread, leftover sausage, buns, student kit. "I'm so glad I met you today," served Archie a glass of Lucy's red liquid. "I won't," she pushed the container away with her hand. "Come on, here's to introductions," he insisted. The girl looked at the others. Everyone was having fun. They were already drinking heavily. Well, she took the glass. Archie raised his own. They silently touched, and Lucy took a sip. She had tasted champagne once before, when they had been married, so she didn't like the tart liquid. The girl wanted to put the glass on the table, but the guy didn't let her do it. In the evening, when it was already very dark outside the window, Lucy and Archie sat in a small room on his bed. The girl's head was spinning. She was smiling. "Lucy, do you know how much I loved you at school?" he whispered in her ear, hugging her himself. "Archie, I'm married." She pulled his hands away. "I know, and I'm not saying anything, but my husband's not around." His breath tickled her neck. It was funny. I'm not like that," she said in a slurred voice. "Okay, I can wait." He kissed her cheek, then stood up, helped her up. "Maybe we'll go to the dorm. We have school tomorrow." She saw Julia making out with one of the guys. "Do you want me to walk you out?" Archie asked her. Yeah, she wasn't going to stay here. They reached the dormitory without adventure. Archie hugged Lucy on the steps. "I'll come back tomorrow. We'll go for a walk," he told her, his face so close it looked like he was going to kiss her. Lucy herself doesn't know what was wrong with her at that moment, but she wanted it. Archie touched her lips gently and let go. She walked into the building, went up to her room, lay in bed, and instantly fell asleep. In the morning, she walked to class and remembered what had happened yesterday. Why she acted like that, what she was missing. It was embarrassing. She had only met Julia at school, and she was cheerful. "Are you going to the guys today?" she asked her friend. No, the girl didn't want to. But no one considered her opinion. Archie came to pick her up in the evening. He was waiting for her on watch while she got ready. All day long, the girl knew she wasn't going anywhere in the evening. But as soon as she was told that a young man had come, she gladly began to get ready. "Hi," she walked out to him. "What took you so long? It's like a date," he laughed, and they walked outside. Lucy liked walking next to the strong and handsome Archie. Of course, she had no feelings for him, just friends. But the guy didn't understand that. He perceived her behavior as if she was flirting with him, and she'd agreed to go out. Archie, why? He brought her a huge bouquet of flowers. "I just like to make you feel good." He hugged her and kissed her on the cheek. In her letters to John, Lucy never said a word about being in a relationship. They also corresponded, confessed their love to each other. Lucy wrote that she was waiting for him. And the new friend kept coming, bringing gifts, flowers, inviting her on dates, which Lucy took for simple meetings. "Are you ready?" He came for her again. Yes, she came out to him. It was already warm outside, so it was possible to spend time somewhere in a summer cafe. "Lucy, I care about you." The young man took her hand. "Archie, why, you know everything." She lowered her eyes and took his hand away. "Perhaps your love with John is all far-fetched," he told her. "That's enough, I'm going home." She still wouldn't look him in the eye. "Okay, think about it." It turned out that they spent the summer together, and in September, they started to meet again in the city where they studied. "We should celebrate our new year of study," Juliet insisted. "I don't mind," Archie said immediately. They got together again at the guy's apartment. Wine, talking, laughing, dancing. Archie went to see Lucy off. As they walked past the park, he put his arm around her. "What are you doing?" She pulled his arm away. "Lucy, stop breaking down." He was very drunk. "Archie, stop it. I trust you as a friend. And you," she walked faster. "What about me?" The guy caught up with her and grabbed her arm. "Nothing." She was trying to get away. "Wait, why did you let me do all that then?" He shouted in her face. "What did I let you do?" She really didn't understand. Taking gifts, going on dates, what? It was all for nothing. He couldn't calm down. "Stop it. Let me go." She ripped my arm out and ran. "No, I'm not letting you go that easily." He pushed her. "Please, you've been so good," she cried. "It's over." He pulled up her skirt. "Bastard," she spat in his face. The guy stopped. The spit seemed to sober him up. He sat down on the pavement. At that moment, Lucy jumped to her feet and ran as fast as she could to the dormitory. "Lucy, what happened?" The janitor shouted to her. She saw that the girl's hair was disheveled and her sweater was torn, but she had already run away without answering her question. Archie didn't show up for a few days, probably because he was ashamed and Lucy didn't want to see him. The girl did not tell anyone anything, just stopped gathering company. "Why weren't you with us yesterday?" Julia asked her. "Just did not want to, tried to look natural girl." "Well, I see I'm not in the mood. I don't want to pester the neighbor." Archie showed up a week later. He called Lucy. She didn't want to go at first, but it was necessary to find out everything to the end. The girl came down to the watch. "Let's go for a walk," her boyfriend called her. "No, I'm not going anywhere with you." She remembered the last walk. "Why, I love you," he shouted so that everyone paid attention to them. "Enough, stop this concert. My husband is coming back any day now." She wanted to leave. "You'll be sorry," he began to threaten. "What can you do?" grinned the girl and went to her room. John wrote down the date he would be back. By this day, Lucy had arrived at her parents' house to meet her beloved husband with them. John got off the wagon all handsome. He walked up to his mother, mother-in-law and wife. All together they went home to celebrate the meeting. The fathers were not at the train station. They prepared everything at home. When everyone was assembled, the questioning began. And the next day the guy and the girl went to the city. There they again rented an apartment. The guy wanted to enter at least a college, to have at least some education. "How glad I am that we are together again," she hugged her lover. "Thank you for waiting." He pressed her against him. For a week, everything was very good in the couple. On Monday, Lucy went to study. She had no premonitions. She sat out her classes. After that, she went to the store, bought groceries, and hurried home. "Selena, I'm home," she shouted as she entered the apartment. She didn't hear a response. She walked into the room. The guy wasn't there and neither were his things. Lucy stood confused. She didn't understand what had happened. "Please pick up the phone." She stood with the phone in her hands. Her husband was unavailable. She threw the phone on the bed. She herself buried herself in her pillow and started to cry. He couldn't go anywhere. only to his mom. The girl got out of bed, began to pack. Not a few hours later, she was in her hometown. "Mom, did John come by?" she asked from the doorstep. "What are you doing here?" A woman came out to her. "Answer me." Lucy was waiting. "No, what happened?" Her mother was curious. "I'll tell you later." "I don't know yet." She went to her mother-in-law's. Aunt Selena, she knocked on the door. "What do you want?" John opened it. "Please, love, explain what's going on." She wanted to hug him, but he pulled her arms away. "Lucy, we're breaking up." He was very serious. "What? Why?" She sat down on the poof in the hallway, covered her face with her hands and cried. "Here, this is not enough for you." He did not explain anything to her, threw an envelope in front of the girl. Lucy took the envelope, opened it. There was a letter and many pictures. The paper stated that she had been dating a certain Archie for a year. He gave her flowers, gifts, went out, kissed her. Attached to all this were photographs. One of her sitting on Vladimir's lap, another of him giving her flowers. Lucy threw it all on the floor. She cried even more, realized that the classmates so decided to get back at her. "Selena, I'm sorry, but we had nothing." She approached her husband. "Don't call me that. It was obvious he had no intention of communicating. I swear to you. Yes, we dated, we went out, but it never went any further than that." She was silent, remembering the night Archie had almost committed a terrible act. "Why didn't you write to me about it? He's a friend of ours. I would have said you were in the same company, but you didn't. Why?" He didn't look at her. "I don't know. I didn't want to upset you. I don't need anyone else but you." She sat down next to him. "No, I can't forgive that." The boy put his head down on his hands. But why? She was getting hysterical. "It's a betrayal," he said quietly. "John, I understood everything. I realized I only need you." She stood up, came up behind him and hugged him. "Lucy, don't. He hasn't done anything. He's a scoundrel because I didn't go with him. He did that so you and I would break up." Lucy didn't want to tell him about that situation. "I don't care which one of you." "Which one?" He got up and went into the hallway. The pictures were still lying there. "I'm not leaving until you forgive me," Lucy said. "Well, you can settle down. You've been here a million times. You know what's where." The guy started to put on his shoes. "And you?" The girl cried again. "And I need to think it over." He walked out and slammed the door. Not 15 minutes later, the door opened and Selena walked in. She saw the girl, the mess in the hallway, came up to her. "What happened here?" the mother-in-law asked. John left, slumped down in Lucy's chair. After that, they called Betty. She came over. Lucy told them everything. "Yes, I know that she was in touch with this Archie." They even came to visit together, was surprised by the mother that her husband did not believe her daughter. "Look what he sent him," showed the girl the pictures, chose the most provocative ones. The women read and looked at everything. "So, now I'll call him." Selena got up and started dialing her son's number. "What's he saying?" Betty looked at her. "Lucy, go home. He said he'll think about it. He'll come and talk to you." Selena spoke quietly and stroked her daughter-in-law's back. "Do you promise?" She raised her eyes to her. "Yes," she kissed the top of her head. Lucy packed up and walked to the train station. She sat in the apartment again and suffered. How she wanted to find Archie now and tell him everything. But she knew how mean he was, so she didn't want to make things worse. The next day she was back at school. Every time she came home she hoped John had arrived, but he hadn't. "Hi," he came after a month. John, she wanted to throw herself at him but didn't. She thought she would push him away. "I came to talk to him." He came into the apartment. And that was it? Lucy felt like she was going to cry again. "Let's see." He walked over and sat down on the couch. "Ask me, I'll tell you everything." She sat down next to him. "Tell me everything as it happened," her husband asked. And Lucy told for about an hour how it all began and how it ended. The only thing she missed was the story in the park. "Why didn't you tell him you thought of him as a friend?" The young man couldn't understand. "How could I realize that he doesn't know it himself?" she reflected. "Yeah, you still have a lot of learning to do," he smirked. "John, I swear to you that, between us, nothing happened." She moved closer to him. "I believe you." He reached out and hugged her. "Really?" She snuggled in. "I went out with him. He couldn't really say anything. And at the end, he admitted he was doing it out of spite. Just like you said, John leaned over and started kissing his wife. Lucy was glad that she and her husband were doing well. Now every morning she prepared his breakfast, went to study, and in the evening they had Jacoptic meetings. John went to school, at the same time went to work in the police. Lucy rejoiced in her husband's success. Darling, guess what? She was holding a small box. I don't know. He took the gift from her hands. Open it. She stood there without breathing. The young man opened the lid, looked first inside and then at Lucy. Is this what I think it is? He didn't want to get excited ahead of time. Yes, she clapped her hands together. Inside the box was a 2-strike pregnancy test and a pacifier. We love it. He stood up and hugged her. Afterwards, the young people informed the future grandmothers about everything. The latter were of course delighted. John continued to work. Lucy had only a few months to finish her studies. After that, she was not going to get a job anywhere because she would start her maternity leave. Wait, her husband pulled away from her. His phone was ringing. Okay, she went into the kitchen. Honey, I'm being paged. He's leaning over her from behind. What? It's your day off, she got upset. Yeah, but some thugs robbed the cash register in one of the villages. They were spotted and now they're inside shooting back. He was fully dressed. Be careful, his wife kissed him. He walked out of the apartment. Lucy herself doesn't know why, but she crossed him. She had never done that before. Lucy, the phone rang in the night. Yes, she didn't understand anything when she woke up. You can come to the hospital. John is hurt, a male voice told her calmly. Not understanding, she sat up in bed. Come, a silence formed on the other end. She didn't realize what she was doing. Rushed to the hospital. What? She expected to be led to John now. Those scumbags were shooting buckshot. He's been hit. He's unconscious now. Muttered what was probably a co-worker. Can I see him? Lucy asked. I don't know. He looked around, looking for a doctor. The girl was thrashing around the corridor. She couldn't gather herself. When the doctor came to them, he explained that the wound was serious. The shot could go in different directions. Lucy started calling her and John's parents. By morning, everyone was gathered. Selena was crying. No one was bothering her. For 3 long days, women and men took turns being on duty at the hospital. And on the morning of the 4th day, John died without regaining consciousness. Daughter, her mother called her. No, she screamed into the phone. Hold on, her mother tried to find words of encouragement, but nothing worked. I'm coming. Lucy wanted to get out of her seat and run to them. No, you don't have to. We'll be right there. Betty stopped her. Everyone was saddened by this sad event. They just sat there in silence. Lucy was staring at one point on the wall. She couldn't even move. Daughter, you don't have to be so hard on yourself. Your husband was a hero. Carlos sat down next to her. I know. Her voice was lifeless. The day of the funeral, Lucy went crazy. Nothing could stop her. She screamed like a wounded animal. And when no one was home, she even tried to kill herself. But her mother came back in time. Daughter, what are you doing? You have to live. You will have a child. She grabbed her and held her for so long until she stopped kicking. Mom, I can't do without him. He's my life, my love, the girl screamed. Everything will be fine. Remember that you'll have a little one soon. Then your brains will fall into place. That's how Harry caught them when he got back to the apartment. What? He didn't finish, she realized. The procession was very slow. So many people had gathered, colleagues, acquaintances, friends, relatives. They were really burying him like a hero. And only Lucy and Selena sat on the bench because they could not believe that their boy and husband were no longer in this world. I will always be with you. Lucy rushed to the grave. Her father managed to grab her in time. He was ready for it. When it was all over, she just fell on all those wreaths and flowers and sobbed in her voice. What can I do to help her? Betty looked at her husband. But at that moment, the girl was writhing in pain, and her mother noticed it and came running over. She's bleeding, the woman noticed. Hurry up and call an ambulance. The car arrived. The girl looked like a mad woman. The paramedics had to deal with her. When everyone arrived at the hospital, it was clear that nothing good to expect. And so it was. The doctor came out and told the family that the girl's baby was gone. Why did this happen to her, to our girl? Cried Beatty. The father was also somber. "The girl is under sedation now, but in the evening you can pick her up," mumbled the doctor. "Okay." Betsy looked at her friends. "Unequivocally, we are taking her with us," said Harry. When her parents arrived in the evening, Lucy wasn't herself. She seemed to exist, but really everything inside felt like it had been scorched. When she arrived at her parents' house, all she did was lock herself in her room and sit there, tears flowing all by themselves. "Daughter, you have to come to your senses," Selena told her. "I understand that, but everything died inside me." Looked at her with colorless eyes. "Daughter, well, tell me, what do you see as a way out of this situation?" The mother was ready to do anything to help her girl. "I was thinking, maybe I should go somewhere. I will be distracted by my work. I will forget." Lucy turned away to the window. "Of course, if it will make you feel better, then please," she went on all the girls' terms. Already the next day, Lucy began to pack. Her friend had long ago suggested that she go to work on a shift, and now she was finally right for it. "Julia, is your offer still valid?" Lucy called her. "Yes, of course, we're always in need of hands," she said happily. "Then meet me in a couple of days and I'll call you," Lucy decided. She sat at the table with her relatives. It was not as cheerful as it had always been. Selena supported her choice. She continued to socialize with Betty. Lucy slept very badly that night. She was plagued by nightmares. She dreamed of a girl who was reaching out to her and asking her not to leave. In the morning, the girl woke up in a cold sweat. Lucy left. She sat on the train, looking out the window and thought about nothing. At the station, she was met by Julia. The friends hugged. While driving to the place, the girl told everything that happened. She could only sympathize. "Well, here we are. They got out near some building." Now Lucy had to live in the dormitory again, and again her roommate was Julia. "Just like back at school," she smiled. "Yes," Lucy shook her head. In the morning they went to work. The new girl had to learn everything. They had to work in the dining hall, washing dishes, floors, walls, and everything else. Sometimes she'd be asked to serve. It was understandable. "Well, do you agree?" Her neighbor looked at her. "Yes, I have no choice." Lucy was ready for anything. The work was hard at first. When she got involved in the process, there was no time left at all. From the very morning until late in the evening, the girl was in the kitchen. She came home and just fell off her feet. But after she realized everything, she grouped her working time. Now she could have tea with the girls and go out in the evening. "Let's go. There is a place where everyone gathers to spend leisure time," Julia called her when it had been a few weeks. Okay, Lucy wanted to go out. They packed up and set off on their adventure. Lucy knew that with Julia she was sure to find them. Oh, what beauties! They hadn't gotten anywhere yet and they had already been spotted. Two young men stopped to meet the girls. "Hi," Julia said to them. "What do you plan to do?" The young men were curious. "We haven't decided yet," the neighbor said honestly, and it was true. "Come on, you can help brighten up our boring evening," they called the girls. Lucy said nothing, watching. They came to the local cafe, which was very small, but there were so many people here that it was strange how everyone got in. "So here's to the meeting." The young men were fun. "Let's get acquainted." The first thing Lucy said pleased everyone. That's right, the people in the room caught on. "I'm Steve, and this is my friend Austin," now spoke the one who before that was also more silent. Lucy sat sad. She didn't want anything. Then Steve called her outside. "Do you want to go for a walk?" He was already giving her his hand. Okay, they went. The town was small. They came to a house. "Would you like to come in?" the new acquaintance asked. Why not? Lucy didn't care. They went into the place where Steve had rented a place. It was obvious that he was not alone. "Wine?" He pulled a bottle out of the cupboard. "Come on," the girl agreed to everything. When the bottle was emptied, Lucy sat looking at the young man. "Come to me." He held out his arms to her. She stood up and walked over, dizzy. It felt good because all thoughts had gone somewhere. Steve sat her on his lap and started kissing her. The girl liked it. She gave in to his caresses. She was staying with him that night. "Wake up. You have to go to work." Steve woke her up in the morning. Her head hurt. It felt like it was going to fall apart. "Yes, thank you." Lucy was embarrassed because she found 3 other males in the room. "I'll come back tonight," the young man promised, but Lucy never met him again. "What, are you waiting for him?" asked Julia. "How is it that in such a small town, we have not met for several weeks?" Did not understand the girl. They can come for a one-time job, pull a heating main or an electrician, and go to the next object, explained the neighbor. "I see." Lucy looked at her hands, which had become rough from the detergents. They continued to get out with her friend. Lucy had already gotten into the work. In the 6 months she had been working here, she had not given up wine and men. "Lucy, you weren't like this. What happened to you?" Julia asked her. "My problems." She didn't want to justify herself to anyone. Her mother called every day. Lucy sent her money and lied that there was a lot of work and she couldn't come home. Betty believed her, so she didn't say anything. And the girl went on with her life. "Julia, are you coming today or not?" she called her friend. "Wait, she had a headache, so she couldn't get out of bed." "Okay, I'll go then," slammed the girl's door. It wasn't often that they had time to go out, so she didn't want to waste it. That evening she met Sasha. He was so handsome and also brutal, it seemed to Lucy. They took a long walk, talked, and then went to visit him. He lived alone. That was good. Lucy and Alexander spent the night together. In the morning, Lucy went to her place. She no longer expected to meet the man, but he came the next day. "You?" The girl was surprised then. Why such a surprise? He did not understand. Simply, she was ashamed to admit it. "Are you coming?" He waited for an answer. Yes, this insolence and something else like Lucy in this man. Once again they were at Alexander's house. Everything was going well. He was doing a lot for the girl. "Julia, he asked me to live with him," Lucy told her friend in the evening. "And you?" She tensed up. "Well, I'll probably agree." The girl was glad. He is some kind of murky, did not believe Alexander neighbor. "You just don't know him. That's the first impression." Lucy was sure of it. "It's up to you to decide." Her friend pressed her lips together. She didn't like it. "Okay, don't be offended." She hugged and kissed her neighbor, took her suitcase and left the room. From that moment, Alexander and Lucy formed a couple. They went everywhere together. Everything was fine. When the girl began to live together with Alexander, she began to notice that he was doing something illegal in addition to working here. One day, she decided to ask, but she was answered so rudely that she didn't even think about it anymore. "Why are your eyes red?" Julia noticed at work. "Don't mind her." Lucy turned away from her. "I see, she's hitting you," her friend guessed. No, she was telling the truth. It's just that she cried all night after a big scolding. "Okay, tell me if anything," continued the girl. With Sasha was difficult, but Lucy swallowed everything. After all, stability. She noticed that different people came to him. They talk about something, do something. But the girl didn't dare to ask about it anymore. "Lucy, aren't you going home at all?" Her mother asked her when she called. "Mommy, of course I'm going, but not now, a little later." She couldn't explain anything to the woman. "Who called you?" Alexander came up to her. "Mommy," she showed her phone. "I can also write Mom and Angelica will call me." He spoke in a stern voice. "Are you jealous?" She laughed. It was the first time he had ever hit her. Lucy stood, holding her cheek, and looked at Alexander. No one had ever touched her in her life until that moment. "If you misbehave, you'll get another," he promised her. Why? She didn't deserve to be treated like that. "You asked me how many men you've had in all the time you've lived here, and now all they say is that I picked up the poor guy. If I'd known before, I never would have done such a thing." He clenched his fists. "That was before you," she thought. She was acting roughly now. That was it. The conversation was over. The man just walked out of the apartment. Lucy wanted to leave, but she was afraid. There was no one to complain to either. When she got to work the next day, she decided to share with her friend. Can you imagine the look on her face when she told her everything? "Report it," Julia advised her. "I'm scared," Lucy admitted honestly. "Do you want me to report it?" she suggested. "Try, but if he finds out, we'll be in trouble," her friend told her. "Don't worry, we've been in more trouble than this," she promised her. Lucy returned home. She was really afraid of her roommate, but she had nothing to do but wait. A week passed. Alexander came home. "Did you snitch?" He came up to Lucy and grabbed her by the chest. "What are you talking about?" She made big eyes. "You know what?" He gathered some things, then put a chair in the middle of the room and sat the girl down. What are you doing? She was shaking, scared. You'll find out now, he grinned. Alexander tied her to the chair. He doused everything with a smelly liquid for fear. Lucy did not even immediately realize that it was gasoline. He took one more look at her. He flicked a match, threw it on, and closed the doors. Help! She began to scream with all her might. At that moment came the realization that she was not living right, but no one heard the girl. The house was old and wooden. The logs were quickly seized by the fire. Someone called the fire department. Lucy was panting. She rocked harder on the chair. She fell down. It was easier here, but she realized she was losing consciousness. When she was at her wit's end, she felt someone lift her off the floor. Lucy, she opened her eyes. Julia was sitting next to her. Where is he? The girl's first question was. Don't worry, he's right where he needs to be, her friend reassured her. Well and good, Lucy closed her eyes. Imagine, you were right. He was doing all sorts of nonsense to destroy everything. Everything, and set it on fire so they wouldn't find it. Julia started whispering. Yeah, and me for one, the girl cried. All's well that ends well. The neighbor squeezed her hand. What did the doctor say? Lucy wanted to know. Nothing happened to you, just smoke inhalation, the neighbor reassured her. I want to go home so badly, the girl was still crying. Everything will be all right, Julia nodded her head. Lucy was discharged. She immediately wrote a statement and went home. Now on the train, the girl sat. She understood everything and realized that she had been bad. How could she have let John down like that? What had happened to her? Mom, she walked into the apartment. The prodigal daughter had finally returned. Her father came out to meet her. Where's Mom? She came up and hugged Dad. She will come now, in the store, he replied. It was nice and cozy at home. Lucy went to her room. Everything was so nice here. Lucy? Mommy asked from the hallway. Mom ran to her girl. Hello, dear, hugged her. They went into the kitchen. The woman put the kettle on and then began to assemble the table. What a fool I was, Lucy said, looking at her mother. Don't talk bad. You were stressed. You felt bad. The woman reassured her. Yes, everything can be, her daughter agreed with her. Lucy decided to exhale a little and then start her life over again. She looked for job vacancies. Not 2 weeks later, she was invited to work. Where was it this time? Betty was sitting there knitting something. Where I went to school, her daughter confessed. Alone? The mother looked down. For now, she went over and hugged her favorite people. Good, her mother agreed with her again. Lucy took out the diploma she had once received, packed her things and left. She had rented an apartment on the phone. Now all she had to do was pay for it. She got the job. It was easy for Lucy. Lucy had done the right thing. Now she was working in the local hospital department as a nurse, but she liked it. Lucy, would you like to take another job? Her boss asked her. I'll have to think about it. She was just about to go home. She walked down the street and realized that there was never any extra money. Hello, Lucy entered the chief's office. Greetings, have you made your decision? He asked her. Yes, I have, she smiled at him. Then write your application and you can start work. He handed her a blank sheet of paper. Lucy realized that it would be very hard, but the money would come. She wrote everything and left the office. In the evening, she was at home, sitting and thinking about what would happen next in her life. Lucy, you will pull all the veins out of yourself, Elizabeth told her. They met in the hospital. Now they began to communicate closely. What can I do? No one can help me, she said. Do you even have a rest? Her friend asked her. When? Lucy smiled at her. I see, let's go out. Elizabeth suggested it. It was rare, but the girl thought that after the day shift, in the evening you can relax. And indeed, with Elizabeth, they could go to a cafe or restaurant, spend a pleasant time there, relax. Oh, it's so good that you're taking me out. Lucy leaned back in her chair. What else do girlfriends do? She didn't understand. In this place, they liked most of all pleasant music, good cuisine, friendly staff. Girl, can I ask you to dance? A man approached Lucy. Of course, she looked at her friend and gave her hand. Anthony, he introduced himself as they walked to the center. Lucy, it had been a long time since she had danced with anyone or socialized with the opposite sex. You're a good dancer, he said. You too, she didn't know what to say. It was nice, thank you, he said at the end as he walked her back to her seat. Well, what's going on there? Did you get to know each other? Elizabeth started asking at once. Yes, Lucy's face blushed a little. And what then? She waited. Nothing. Thank you for the dance, you heard yourself. The girl raised her glass. But she was wrong. When they were about to go home, Anthony came up to them. Can I walk such beautiful ladies home? He walked in the middle. Of course, smiled Elizabeth. She lived with the man, now taking care of her friend. They walked. There was a casual conversation. Elizabeth saw her boyfriend ahead, said goodbye and ran to him. Where do you live? Anthony asked. Why are you calling me? I look so old, she asked him. Sorry, he was embarrassed. They walked on. There's my house. They walked up to the driveway. Can we exchange phone numbers? He tried. Yes, Lucy agreed. Anthony was a nice man. She walked home, feeling as if flowers were blooming on her soul. Anthony called the next day. Although Lucy was very busy, she took a moment to talk to him. He offered to meet, but she couldn't today. It was the night shift. All I can suggest is that tonight you come here. I'll be out, she muttered. Okay, that would be fine with me for starters. She could hear how pleased he was. Lucy didn't know if he would come or not, but she hoped he would. And he came, and not just for no reason, but with flowers. God, it's been 1,000 years since anyone gave me flowers. She took the bouquet and smelled it. It makes me feel good to do this, he smiled. From that day on, Anthony and Lucy started dating. When it was a day off, they would go to the park or just sit in the yard. The rest of the days, as it worked out. Why do you live in a rented apartment? Move in with me, he suggested to her after 6 months of meetings. Would that be convenient? She was afraid. She'd already trusted him once. What are you saying? Of course it would be convenient, he laughed. I'll have to think about it, Lucy smiled. Of course, he understood that. Okay, I agree. Lucy thought to herself that she'd have found a real man. They started living together. Anthony was flying on wings. Why don't you have a rug in your house? Lucy asked him one day. I don't know, I hadn't thought about it. He looked at the floor, which was covered with linoleum. We should get some, she concluded. Suit yourself, he said, but he didn't offer to give money. Okay, Lucy isn't proud. She has enough. She'll do it all herself. In 6 months, she bought 2 carpets, bedding, a kitchen set, which was assembled by specially hired people. Could you do it yourself? The woman was surprised when she came home from work. You see, the hands do not grow from there. He waved his hands. After that, it was his turn to buy a bed, and then a large closet for clothes. Why are you doing this? Elizabeth asked her when Lucy was telling her. Why, I live there too. I want it to be comfortable. Lucy did not understand the question. Oh, you live like this with men, you invest in them, and then they leave you, Elizabeth sighed. At that moment, Lucy remembered Alexander, shrugged. No, Anthony is not like that. Elizabeth, can you lend me a couple thousand? I saw such a nice shirt. I wanted to buy Anthony, she asked her friend. What, you also dress him? She was amazed. What's the big deal? Lucy was amazed again. Did he buy you anything besides that broom on the first date? No, Lucy thought. Well, you're ready to try. All in your Anthony. He only did what he did to bring you to his place. She marveled at the woman's naivety. Come on, he does so much for me, Lucy said. Oh, you'll be on his side no matter what you say. She wouldn't lend money to her friend. Fine, I'll borrow it somewhere else, she said. She liked to come home, cook for her lover, and then lie in a warm bed. We're having guests over today, Anthony said. Good, it's the day shift. She came over and kissed him. Are you gonna get everything ready? He looked expectant. When I'll be at work all day, let's order in. She hoped Anthony would agree. Okay, just do it yourself. I don't have time, he went out. Elizabeth, would you like to join us today? She asked when she got to the service. What's the occasion? She was curious. Nothing, just Anthony invited some friends and I thought I'd invite you. She was scrubbing the floors and talking at the same time. Well, we'll be there tonight. My friend didn't mind. Lucy, as promised Anthony, ordered everything. She paid for the order. All that was left was to receive it at home. In the evening, she saw that many strangers had come. They were her husband's co-workers. As long as everyone was sitting at the table, talking and eating, Everything was fine. But at some point, Lucy realized that the guests had had too much to drink. "We should dance," Anthony said. "Okay." One of the girls got up and turned up the volume. "Won't the neighbors fight?" Elizabeth asked Lucy. "No, they are normal." The woman was sure of it. She went to the kitchen to get more snacks. Look, when she came back, her friend pointed with her eyes to a couple dancing. It was Anthony and that girl dancing. "Fine, let them relax." Lucy waved them off. "Yeah, if someone danced with Barry like that, I'd kill them." Elizabeth followed her friend. They sat down at the table, but Lucy couldn't help but stare at what her man was doing. They were wriggling so much, he touched the girl on every bulging spot she had. "That's enough." She got up from the table and turned the sound down. "What's the matter?" The ones who were just bouncing on the carpet stopped. "What are you doing here?" She knew what she was doing was wrong, but she couldn't help it. Okay, what are you yelling about?" Anthony said, and they giggled with the girl. "And you still believe him?" asked Elizabeth as she put her coat on in the hallway. "Stop it," Lucy interrupted her. "Okay, your life, but I suggest you take a closer look," her friend warned her. Lucy returned to the room and the couple stood again, already without music, moving slowly. She saw Anthony hugging her as if he wanted to take her immediately. She got disgusted, turned away and left. She cried in the kitchen. All the guests had left, only this girl was left. Elizabeth was in pain. She started washing dishes to distract herself. She heard the front door slam, thought it was the girl leaving. "Anthony?" She went into the room, but there was no one there. She'd done so much for this union, and he'd do this to her. She cleaned up, made the bed, and went to bed. He came in the morning, smelling someone else's perfume in the bed. "Did you like it?" Lucy turned to him. "What?" He wasn't quite sober yet. "The broad," Lucy explained. "Are you jealous?" He chuckled. "No," the girl lied. "Well, sleep then." He turned on his side and sniffled. How to live after that? She just didn't sleep until morning. "Hi," she said hello to everyone when she got to work. "Why do you look so bad?" Elizabeth whispered to her. Not sleeping well, Lucy didn't feel like sharing her thoughts with anyone. "I see, I've made a mess of things," her friend guessed. "What should I do?" The girl almost burst into tears in response. "In the first place, leave one position, all the money you cannot earn, and you are not like a man," advised Elizabeth. "I've already thought about it," she nodded. Today, she went and wrote a statement. If Anthony was making a decent income, she would quit. She was so fed up. As the years went by, Lucy continued to live with the same Anthony. They were satisfied with their mutual neighborliness. There was no love lost between them. He went out without even hiding it. "What's wrong with me?" she asked him one day. "What kind of questions?" The man looked at her surprised. "Just leave it." She didn't want to continue the conversation. If he didn't understand, she didn't have to. "Lucy, you need another man," Elizabeth said. "You look at me." "Who will look at me?" self-critically answered her friend. "You want to talk about yourself. You are still beautiful. Just a long time ago did not take care of themselves." The girl encouraged her as she could. "I did everything for him, and he is so," cried Lucy. "Everything. Do not regret anything. You still have everything ahead of you." Elizabeth hugged her. They continued to work. Lucy wondered why she had given up the night shifts. She didn't want to go home, but there was nothing to do, and she again went to an empty apartment where everything was well done. She was cooking dinner, and the man did not want to return there. "Where have you been?" She felt his cold body at night under the blanket. "That's it. Go back to sleep." He didn't turn to her. Tears choked. That night she decided everything. She went to work in the morning, spent half a day there, took a day off. She came home, packed her things. She couldn't stop the tears. "At first I wanted to write a note, but in the end I decided not to." She stopped, circled the nest she herself had made with a glance, turned around and left. "Hello," she came to Elizabeth. They had agreed that her friend would stay here for a couple of days. "Come in quickly." She didn't want to keep her guest on the doorstep for long. They sat for a while, cooked dinner, ate, and went to bed. Lucy did not want to disturb the couple, so she stayed out of the room until nightfall. "Lucy, go to the 8th room. A man needs help there," the head nurse asked her. She put a basin of clean towels on the table. She entered the room. He was lying on the bed. She did not understand whether the man was asleep or unconscious. Quietly, she approached the bed, checked the IV. Everything was normal there. Then she began to remove absorbent cotton, syringes, and other things from the bedside table. Drink, she heard, and she was scared. Now she took a mug that was standing there, dipped the cotton swab, and moistened his lips. He licked greedily. More, he asked. Yep, she repeated her movements. He wrinkled his nose and opened his eyes. The whites were red. The young man looked at Lucy. She blushed for some reason. He reminded her of John. She came over and sat on the edge of the bed, though it was not customary. If you could say so. He could hardly even speak, but he tried to smile. Soon you'll get better and you'll be as good as new, Lucy reassured the young man. Your words would be. He began to cough. The girl quickly approached. You don't have to talk much. She lifted his head to make him stop. Elizabeth, have you seen the patient from the 8th? She asked her friend in the corridor. No, why? She turned and looked at her in surprise. I don't know, but when I saw him, something inside clicked, Lucy admitted. That's a good sign, Elizabeth laughed. She decided to find out a little about who was in their facility. She asked this one, that one, the other one, the third one, and gathered a lot of information and gossip. Already in the evening, when they came home, Elizabeth called Lucy into the kitchen. They needed to talk. What are you suddenly in the middle of the week? The girl looked at the bottle of wine that stood on the table. We need to talk about something, Elizabeth said cryptically. Okay, Lucy took the glasses and poured ruby liquid into them. Listen, your new acquaintance is not simple. The hostess cut the cheese. I don't even know his name. Only later I realized that I could look it up in the medical records. She blushed again. I don't know if it's true or not, but a lot of people say about him that he doesn't do the right things. Elizabeth lowered her voice. What kind of things? Lucy asked in a whisper, leaning over the table. Both laughed afterward. No one was home and they were vociferating. I do not know, said her friend seriously, but he is not in our hospital because he fell down the stairs. Why are you telling me all this? I'm not going to do anything. Lucy took a sip of wine. Yeah, I can see you sitting there, blushing and turning white. The girl smiled. Well, enough. Time will tell, you know. He reminded me something of my first husband. Immediately became sad eyes. Then I see, Elizabeth guessed, why everything is so. They sat until the husband of the friend came. Then they fed Sergei dinner, talked, and went to their rooms. In the morning, Lucy got up. Her mood was very good. For the first time in a long time, she sat in front of the mirror, made her hairstyle, made up her eyes. When she stepped out into the hallway, Elizabeth gasped. Lucy, you're so... She stopped talking. Like what? She smiled. I don't know, gentle, beautiful. They left the house and headed to their work. Lucy didn't wait to be asked or forced to go to room number 8. She went there herself. The first thing she did today was look at the medical history. She took it and looked at it like she was looking at what the patient had been prescribed. She read that his name was Jacob. She glanced out the window and said the name to herself again. What are you hanging out there? He's been looking at her for a few minutes now. I see you're feeling better, she said sarcastically. Give me a drink, he said sharply, and because his voice was hoarse, it seemed to be rude. Now, a little offended Lucy, she went to the nightstand and gave him a glass of water. Thanks, Sardi. He handed her back the empty glass. It's okay, she headed for the exit. Sit with me, the young man said in a different tone. What? She stopped at the door. Lucy heard everything, but she wished he would ask again. Stay with me, he didn't refuse her. Okay, she smiled, but when she turned to him, she was completely serious. Lucy walked over to the bed, pulled up a chair and sat down on it. Tell me about yourself. He lay on his back and looked up at the ceiling. My name is Lucy. I work here. She shrugged because she didn't know what to say next. Husband, kids? He turned his head slightly in her direction. Just like that, her cheeks began to blush again. Why are there any secrets? He grinned and then grimaced. No, Lucy was confused. I'm just kidding. My name is Jacob, and I'm not really into anything, so I came to you for a while, he said. Nice to meet you. The girl was embarrassed. It was obvious that he was getting better because he was already joking and talking a lot. That's what the girl told the doctor when she left the room. She could not wait to meet Elizabeth and tell her everything that had happened, but they didn't meet until the evening when they went home. Look, I promised I'd stay with you for a couple days. But it just so happens that I wasn't even looking for anything. Lucy looked at her friend. You what? Do not even think about it. Live as long as you want. You do not embarrass us, sincerely said Elizabeth. And we made friends today, bragged Lucy to her. With whom? She didn't understand, because she was quick to change the subject. Jacob, Lucy laughed. Jacob who? She still couldn't understand. What Jacob could Jacob be like? The sick one from 8th grade. Lucy laughed, offended because that was all she could think about. Oh, that's what you mean. Elizabeth laughed at the fact that she hadn't realized it for so long. Yes, he told me about himself. I did the same and all. We are already friends. She recalled how it was. Actually, you can't flirt with Patience. Elizabeth wagged her finger. I know, and I don't flirt. The girls were in high spirits. At home, it was business as usual. Lucy couldn't wait to go to bed. She wanted it to be morning already, and she wanted to be by his side. She was going to work alone today. She told Elizabeth that she would get out early to go to the store. No one had come to see the young man in 2 days, so she decided to make him happy with something. Lucy bought some fruit and juice and headed for the hospital. Here I am, she slipped into the room. Hey, he was already half sitting up on the pillows. Look what I brought you. She started to put everything she bought on the nightstand. And why? He looked at it all. To make you happy. She didn't understand his mood today. Okay, he smiled at her, just like last time. After that, they ate oranges, talked and laughed. It's all you was the only thing he kept saying. After that, Lucy started giving Jacob massages. Several times each day, she went up to him for it. He would yell, but she ignored it. They were getting up, taking their first steps. In 6 months, Jacob was standing on his own feet. He looked at the girl with great love and gratitude. Would you be my wife? He asked her at breakfast. Do you honestly want that? She couldn't believe she was sitting here with him, as if all those years she'd spent in a bad relationship hadn't happened. What are you talking about? Of course you do. You are the kindest and most loyal girl. He got up from his seat and, leaning on his cane, walked over to her. Yes, I want to be your wife, she blushed. Then you will soon have the best wedding ever. He went to the seat. They were no longer in their 20s, but much more, but they were both young at heart. At the wedding were invited parents. Did not forget Lucy and Selena and her husband, who were happy for her. In addition, the former mother-in-law confirmed that Jacob is very similar to John. The friends had a nice celebration. The bride and groom were happy. How are you doing with him? Is he good? Elizabeth asked her. Very good. You have no idea how caring he is, Lucy said and looked at her husband. Didn't it seem to you that he only needed you when it was bad? Her friend began to doubt again. Look, we've been through so much together. I don't think he proposed for nothing. Lucy didn't believe it. I wish it were so. Elizabeth even spat. The guests left and the young people were alone. Jacob wasn't quite well enough to do business again, so he spent a lot of time at home. So far, so good. But as he got stronger, he started to disappear from home. At first, he tried to come home every day, but it was not very convenient for him. So after a while, Lucy slept alone. The girl had nothing to do. She called her friend Elizabeth. Oh, that again, you have nothing to do. She was upset for Lucy. No, everything is fine. Now he will catch up with what he missed while he was sick, and everything will fall back into place, defended her husband's wife. We'll see. Elizabeth didn't believe anything anymore. And indeed, Jacob, not 3 months later, was right at home. Lucy wondered very much what was wrong. Why are you always at home? What about your work? She wanted to know everything about the man she loved. Don't ask unnecessary questions. If I'm at home, it's necessary, he told her rudely. Lucy did not interfere. She remembered what had happened when she had interfered in the affairs of her roommate. She was pleased that they were always together, of course. Jacob didn't spend every minute with her the way his wife would have liked. Why can't I go to work? She asked her husband, bored at home. No, you won't, he said imperiously. Can I at least go to a friend to visit? She could not sit in 4 walls. No, I need you. He took her hand and sat her on his lap. That made Lucy melt. She didn't need anything else. After a short time at home, Jacob started leaving again. He could be gone for a week or more. Lucy was jealous, worried. Come and visit and we'll talk. Elizabeth urged her. And if her husband came back, she didn't want to upset him. Oh, so sit with your husband, she said, as if offended. Jacob never showed up. A day later, Lucy got a call from the hospital, her heart sinking. She pulled herself together in a minute and drove to her lover's house. He was bleeding internally. What had happened? No one would explain. Beloved, come to your senses. She sat beside his bed after the operation, but all she got in response was silence. Again, a couple weeks in hospital and then bed rest at home. Lucy was there for him. Porridge, broth, medication. She could stay up nights because Jacob wasn't feeling well. Okay, I've got errands to run. It's been a month since he got out of that hospital bed. Lucy disappeared into Jacob's room for most of her working hours. After a week, the doctor gave him permission to get up, but he couldn't do it himself, so Lucy helped him. She walked with him first around the room, then in the hallway as well. Jacob said nice things, thanked her. A month passed very quickly, and during that time the young people became friends and they said goodbye very warmly. Will we meet again? The girl didn't want to let him go. Of course, he promised and got into the car that came after him. Lucy was sad. She looked after the departing car and almost cried. How are you? Elizabeth came up behind her. Everything is fine, blinked the girl, and a tear fell treacherously on her cheek. Come on, her friend took her hand and led her back into the building. Lucy continued to stay with Elizabeth. After she told her to live as long as she wanted, she hadn't even thought about it. Now she realized she had to look for an apartment. What are you doing? You've been living for so long. You don't need to move out, began to persuade her Elizabeth when her friend told her about it. I don't know, I still feel uncomfortable. Lucy was telling the truth. It's fine, trust me. I would have told you right away, the girl assured her. Lucy waited for him, but he didn't come. It was a shame. A month passed, the second, and Roma was still not there. Enough waiting, her girlfriend pitied her. You know, I try to talk myself out of it, but I can't, Lucy told her then. Another month later, a car pulled up to the hospital. I need Lucy, a young guy ran in. Now, Elizabeth met him, went to look for her friend. Hello. The girl came out into the lobby. She was very surprised that someone was looking for her. I need you. He showed her the car. The girl's heart beat faster. She had really waited for him. She turned to her friend, who looked surprised at everything that was happening. Let's go, Lucy said confidently. They climbed into the parlor. The guy there said Jacob wasn't feeling well and he'd sent him here for her. Excitement set in. Let's go, the girl said confidently. They drove off. Elizabeth stood at the window and saw everything. She was worried about her friend because she did not say anything, where she went, where to look for her in case of emergency. What happened to him? Lucy worried in the car. You'll see, it was obvious that the guy was focused on the road. They arrived somewhere outside of town, there to a house that was surrounded by a fence. The girl got out of the car, waiting for the doors to open so she could get in. She was led into the house, escorted into a room. Jacob was in bed again. He was asleep. Hello, she said loudly to make him wake up. Lucy, he opened his eyes and mumbled her name. What happened to you? Why didn't you come? She walked over to his bed. He moaned. Now she looked at the medication that was lying here. She decided to give him a painkiller. Don't, asked the doctor. He shook his head. Where is he? She rushed to the door, stepping out into the hallway. There she was shown to a room with a man in it. Are you the doctor? She turned to him. Yes, is something wrong? He got up from his chair. He's in pain, she pointed to the wall. Now he came out of his and went into the room where Jacob was lying. He saw that one of the medicines had been set aside. I wanted to give it to him, but he wouldn't let me. He sent it to you, Lucy admitted. Do you have a medical degree? The doctor turned to her. Yes, I'm a nurse, she nodded. Good, you wanted to do the right thing. You have to trust. The last words were addressed to Jacob. Thank you, Lucy said quietly. She stayed to live in the house. She called Elizabeth, told her to write a statement for her. After that, she alerted the management, and they went along with it. She sat by the bedside of a man she really liked. Lucy didn't know why she was willing to do anything for him. She gave him compresses, turned him over, gave him shots, IVs, whatever she had to do. Thank you. He took her hand and pulled her to him. Anyone would have done the same. She tried to say something. Because her heart was pounding, she was worried about being so close to him. No, he looked into her eyes and then pulled her close and kissed her. Lucy realized she loved this man. Let's try to get up. He'd been sitting up for a while now, but the bones were shattered. They'd been put back together piece by piece, so it wasn't a given that he'd be able to do anything. Probably couldn't, he doubted. But Lucy took his hands, one placed on her shoulders. The young man managed it. He stood by the bed for only a few seconds, then sat back down. There, she was breathing hard because it was a little hard. Be careful, his wife saw him off. She, as in other years, was alone in the house. There was a different kind of joy now. The husband had hired a housekeeper, whom Lucy liked to talk to. Naomi, still have time to do everything. Let's have lunch. She invited her assistant to the table. I can't do that, she made big eyes. What's the big deal? Lucy didn't understand. They sat down at the table, talked about a lot of things, mostly about life. Naomi told about her difficult fate. So Lucy opened up to this woman. Of course, it hadn't happened the first day they met. It had been a couple years since she'd been employed there. Jacob came home very rarely, and he and his wife practically stopped communicating. Lucy would rush to meet her lover when he showed up, but he'd say he was tired and wanted to go to bed. And in the morning, he'd disappear again. Jacob, I need to talk to you. Lucy told him seriously when their marriage was 8 years old. Can you do that? He even stopped. Don't you believe it? The woman was so fed up with everything. She was kind of married and kind of not. She wanted clarity. Tell me, he exhaled impatiently. What's going on with you and me? She asked him forehead to forehead. Nothing, he smirked. That smirk of his had attracted Lucy so much before, but now it pissed her off. Jacob, I'm your wife. I've been sitting here alone for years, and you won't let me go anywhere, she cried. And you remember who you were, where I got you out of, and all you can do is look after me. I've got another family, a kid. Yes, I'm married to you, but I'm fine there. You're just a backup. He said all this to her face and left the house. What? She stood there confused. Lucy went to her room, cried a lot. Naomi came over in the evening. She wanted to talk to someone, but the woman couldn't leave the room. Her heart was breaking into pieces. Strangely enough, Jacob came the next day. He went straight to Lucy's room. He sat down on a chair. What? She didn't understand. She'd had a sleepless night, so her head wasn't thinking straight. Who were you before? How did you try to organize your life? He waited. I don't understand, she thought to herself. How could he know all this? Don't talk to the servants. He guessed what she was thinking. Understandable. She looked down at the floor. It was embarrassing if Naomi also exaggerated everything. So, did you make free love? He leaned toward her. Jacob, she didn't want to talk about it. It was a long time ago and not true. Lucy wanted to forget it all like a bad dream. Jacob, what? He jumped to his feet. It was all long before she met you. She tried to speak calmly so as not to irritate the man. Yes, and being told that my wife is an easy woman, it feels good. He grabbed her arm. It hurts me. She started to get scared. Me too. He looked at her and breathed heavily. And what are you going to do now? She couldn't think of anything, only of that grip that clenched tighter and tighter. You don't need to know that. He shoved her so hard that she fell on the bed. Lucy cried, and he gave her a look as if he'd spat at her and walked out. In the evening, Lucy thought of nothing better than to get even. She was alone, pulled a bottle of hard liquor and pills from the bar. Everything was in front of her. Why would she want this life? Everything is wrong and everything is wrong. She's only ruining things for others, her parents, her friends, her men. She poured into a glass, poured in a handful of pills. When she drank the bitter medicine, she felt immediately dizzy. Lucy knew the effects would come quickly. As she was passing out, she saw the front door open. She remembered nothing else. Lucy, she heard, her consciousness was badly clouded. For the first few seconds, she didn't realize where she was or what had happened to her. But it all came. She squeezed her eyes shut, though she hadn't opened them yet. Why couldn't she even die properly? Thank God she woke up. Elizabeth was standing over her. Jacob was beside her. What's wrong with me? Lucy realized that she hadn't gone to the other world, but it couldn't be without a trace. It's okay. Her friend stroked her head. Nothing is good. Neither are the brains in your head. What? Afraid to take more so I can come and feel sorry. He spoke in a tone that made Elizabeth want to punch him in the face. I'm sorry I didn't. Lucy closed her eyes. The man left. The friends were left alone. Tell me the truth, Lucy cried. You have pinched some nerves in your face and also in your neck, but also in general. Your body is poisoned, said her friend. Lucy couldn't think about how she looked now. She was on her way to recovery. That's when she realized what she had done. When she wanted to get a glass of water, she couldn't do it. Her fingers wouldn't listen. She'd get out of bed, but after a while, she'd get tired. On top of that, my immune system was completely weakened. Let's go. Jacob entered the room when she was discharged home. She needs help, Elizabeth said. So help her, he said in a tone that demanded no objection. They left the hospital together, Elizabeth carrying her friend in a wheelchair. Afterward, Jacob put her in the car, and they drove off. At the house, Lucy saw young people, a guy and a girl. She wondered who it could be. They rent an apartment here, he explained. What about me? She wondered. It's okay, they'll be patient, and when they get ready to buy, we'll decide. It was agreed that the young people would try to live in the private sector, and if they liked it, they would buy the house. No one warned them that the landlady would be ill, but the owner assured them that she would not interfere with them. So they did. It was so cold in the room, but Lucy was too shy to ask anyone for anything. She pulled several blankets over herself. She went out to the kitchen, ate something. The young neighbors looked at her, tried to talk, but the woman didn't need it. Lucy, can I help you? A girl came up to her when she was going to the kitchen again. You have your own life. I don't want to disturb you, she said. Would you like to go for a walk? You're always in the house? Maria asked her. If it's not too much trouble, help me get dressed. Lucy was ashamed, but she hadn't breathed fresh air in months. Of course, Maria did as she was asked. Lucy went out of the house, told the girl that she could handle it from there, and she promised to follow her in a few minutes. It was freezing, and it was cold to be outside for long. Lucy didn't want to be followed, so she presumptuously went into the back of the lot. There she sat for a while, and when she felt herself freezing, she got up and walked back. But the woman did not calculate her strength. She slipped and fell. It is not known how much time passed while Maria was looking for her. What are you doing? You'll catch cold. Maria found her at last. Thank you, cried Lucy. She lay in her room, tears running down her cheeks. Already during the night, Lucy had a fever. It was hard for her to breathe, but the woman didn't call anyone. She was ashamed that she had to ask strangers for help. Lucy, how are you feeling? Maria came into the room. I'm fine, she wheezed. What are you talking about? You have a fever. She went over and touched her head. An ambulance was called and the woman was rushed to the hospital. Bilateral pulmonary edema. They put her in the ward, and then there were several weeks of treatment. Lucy had a long time to recover from this condition. Maria and Elizabeth came to visit her. Thank you, the woman cried. Her friend offered to call her mother, but Lucy was against it. It was not easy for her. What are you saying? Anyone would do that. She recognized herself in Maria. When she felt better, she was allowed to go home. Jacob, hello, Maria called him. We agreed to buy the house from you. He arrived and saw his wife lying in bed. She had lost a lot of weight and her face was distorted. I'll leave her here and file for divorce. Don't worry, she won't live longer than a year. But for that, I'll give you a discount. He looked at the future owners of the house. How can you do that to a person? Maria didn't understand. You do not know how she acted. He scheduled a meeting for tomorrow to draw up the documents and hand over the money. How are you? A girl came into the room in the evening. Why did you agree to leave me here? Lucy asked, while she thought, if it weren't for this, where would she go? She didn't want to be a burden on her mother's shoulders. I talked to my father. He said he would help you in your treatment. Maria sat down next to the bed. She smelled of kindness. What are you saying? I don't need anyone's help. Lucy made a face that made Maria laugh. You do not need to know that. You are still very young. Everything will get better. And people like your husband, you just need to throw aside. Maria saw without any stories what kind of man he is. Lucy was grateful to the girl. She lay back and smiled to herself. Living so many years with a man under the same roof, he offered her money to buy things in the stores. Why did she always refuse? She should have taken it and saved. Now at least she would have a financial cushion. It's nothing. Maria looked after a woman her husband, Mickey Lucy, didn't see often. But when she needed his help, he was there for her. You become like a mother to me. The girl hugged her sometimes. You grew up without her? The woman guessed. Yes, she left us when I was not even 3 years old. It seemed that Maria was going to cry. Gone somewhere or not at all? Lucy asked cautiously. Not at all. A tear rolled down her cheek. I'm sorry, the woman squeezed her hand. It's okay, I don't remember her at all. The girl wiped her tears and smiled again. Lucy decided that she would try, recover, and help Maria in any way she could. But time passed and it did not get better. The cough that used to choke her was much less now. And we have guests. Maria came to a woman's room. Who? The woman tensed up. More than anything else in the world, she was afraid of the arrival of her mother, that when she saw, she would not listen to anyone, just take her home. And Lucy could not afford that. Allow me to introduce Nani. A man entered the room. He had gray hair, but he didn't look old. Jacket, pants, boots, and most of all, Lucy noticed the perfume. She knew it wasn't cheap. Hello, she said quietly, trying to cover her face. You know, Lucy, as much as I've heard about you, it seems like I know you personally. He walked over and shook her hand. Why this officiousness? Just Lucy. She felt the redness coming to her face. Okay then, I'm Nani. He looked at her. Rays of wrinkles diverged from his eyes, but that only adorned the man. They talked some more and then Maria invited them to the table. Lucy didn't want to go, but Nani insisted. He helped her up. The woman threw on a robe. I'm sorry I'm like this. Lucy imagined herself, her hair tousled with graying, herself in some kind of robe. What are you talking about? You're sick. We'll sit at the table, and then we'll get you back to bed. He walked very quietly and supported her. Maria did her best. There was nothing on the table. Everyone sat down at the table and talked a lot, including the treatment. I can't agree to this, she looked at Nani. At that moment, she felt that he was not looking at her as a weak and sick woman. Okay, I'll lend you the money after I can. You pay it back in installments. He tilted his head to the side, waiting for her answer. Are you sure it will help me? Her head was involuntarily tilted this way. I'm 200% sure. He raised his wine glass at something else and drank. I guess I'll be going. Lucy started to get up. No, we're going for a little walk now. Nani stood up and gave the lady a hand. But me, she pointed to her robe again. That's okay. Here's the coat. He pulled out of the closet. We won't be long. They went outside, stood there for a while, both of them being silent. It was a pleasure to chat. He walked her to her room. We didn't even talk. She smiled her crooked smile. You know, sometimes even being quiet with someone is good. He took her hand, kissed it, and left. Lucy sat on the bed, looking at the closed door. That's why, when she had become so helpless and ugly, she had met a decent man. Not wanting to think about it, she picked up a book and started reading to ward off the bad thoughts. Maria saw Lucy off to the clinic, which her father had paid for. Elizabeth volunteered to accompany her, to be there for her if needed. You don't realize what an amazing man he is, Lucy told her on the road. You know, the fact that he gave money for treatment, yes, but you have to look at him. Again criticized another man, Lucy. You can always tell at first sight, squinted her friend. Yes, but this one doesn't seem to have any flaws. Elizabeth couldn't believe herself when she said that. They arrived at the clinic. There the women were placed in a room. Elizabeth had an extra place. The treatment began. Lucy underwent 3 surgeries in total. The doctors tried to relax her muscles. Whether it worked or not, it will be seen when the rehabilitation course is over. Elizabeth, help, Lucy asked. It was not easy for her. Her face was in bandages. She couldn't even drink properly. Now call right away. That's what I came here for. She jumped up from her seat. You know, I thought I'd call my mother, Lucy said one night. Don't you think it would be a shock to her? She's not a girl anymore. Elizabeth was worried about Betty. I don't know, but for some reason I feel like doing it now. Lucy wanted to cry, but the doctor said she should do it less often. Well, let's wait a couple more days, or in general, discharged and go straight to her, offered options Elizabeth. Soon, you'll find out. Just wait a bit. He drove on. The car stopped outside the restaurant. The man got out, opened the door on Lucy's side, helped her out. Mickey and Maria were waiting for them on the porch. "Daddy," the girl wanted to say something, but the man put his finger to his lips. "Why are you all like this?" Lucy looked at Mickey, who seemed as confused as she was. They walked to the lounge and sat down at a table. "Lucy, when Maria started telling me about you, you reminded me of a woman. I couldn't believe it until I saw you." He put a photograph on the table. Lucy took it. There was a young woman who looked just like her. She was wearing the same blue dress at the time it was taken, and her hair was the same. "I mean, you turned me into her." It was a little uncomfortable. No, it was just love at first word, not even a look. Tears appeared in Nanny's eyes again. "I like you too." The woman told the truth. "Then let's drink to that." They all raised their glasses except Maria. "What are you doing?" Her father looked at her. "I can't." She looked at her husband. "What? I'm going to be a grandfather?" Nanny was happy. "Yes." She looked at Lucy. "And you, a grandmother, if you agree." Of course I would agree. The atmosphere was very familial. They had a wonderful evening. After that, they got into their cars and drove home. When they stopped at one of the intersections, Lucy noticed a familiar silhouette in the car next to her. It was Jacob, and as soon as he felt someone looking at him, he turned around. The woman smiled. She could see the man's face start to turn white when he saw her in the nice car, next to the imposing man beside her. "Will you marry me?" Nanny asked her at that moment. "Yes," she smiled. She had finally found the happiness she had been searching for all of her life. "Okay, as always, your take." Smiling was also contraindicated for now. Lucy studied hard. She didn't want Nanny's money to go to waste. She did everything the doctor said. Finally, it was time to remove the bandages. Lucy looked at herself in the mirror and couldn't believe it. Yes, her head was slightly tilted to the side, but now only she noticed it, and most importantly, she could control it. But the distortion of facial expressions wasn't what it used to be, especially since the surgeon had said that as she practiced daily, it would go away completely. "I can't believe it." She looked at her friend. "And he did it. Everyone wanted only to cripple you, but he cured you." Elizabeth raised a finger up. It was necessary to stay here a little longer. Elizabeth was told that Lucy no longer needed an escort. She had to go home. "What a pity that you and I are not back together." The friends hugged. "Come, let's go to mine," reminded Lucy of her friend's promise. "I will." She kissed her on the cheek and left. Lucy had time to think. After all the treatments and everything else, she would lie on the bed or sit by the window and look out there. There were only good thoughts in her head. She thought that even as she left Mickey and Maria, she would never forget them. When the girl gives birth, she could stay with her grandchildren. The door opened a little. Yes, Lucy wondered. No one had come to see her at this time already. She looked around, saw Nanny. "Madama," he spread his arms to embrace the woman. "I think you're flattering me a little." She stood up and walked towards him. "No, I never lied to anyone, nor do I say flattering words." The man hugged Lucy, and then they sat down right there in the ward. "I'm glad of that fact." She looked at him. He was handsome. Lucy began to imagine what he must have been like when he was younger. He must have had a lot of girls. "Listen, you're being discharged in a couple of days. I want to pick you up myself and surprise you." He didn't say what. "Okay." She didn't understand why she needed permission for that. "Promise that I'll do everything the way I want, and if you don't like it, you'll fix it," he said, and then didn't look her in the eye. "For what you've already done to me, I'll be grateful to you for the rest of my life." She pointed at her face. "Deal then." He took her hand as he always did, kissed it, and left the room. It was nice to be cared for by someone other than yourself. Lucy waited to be discharged, and it came, just like Nanny had said, 2 days later. "Hey, he was alone. I thought Maria would be with you." The woman was surprised. "Let's go. Remember I promised you a surprise," the man reminded her. "Yes, I'm very curious what it will be." She got into the car. First in line was the beauty parlor. "Why?" She turned to him. She realized she didn't look good, but she could do it herself, but later. Quietly, he put a finger to his lips. "You promised." Lucy went. Nanny waited patiently in the car. Her hair was colored, styled. The woman's eyes looked immediately younger. After that, a little makeup. She walked to the car. She felt like she had been transformed into a queen. Beautiful. Nanny couldn't help but compliment her. Where to now? She turned to him. To the store, the man said confidently. You're so crazy. She shook her head. You'll understand everything later, he spoke in riddles. Several dresses were already ready to be tried on when Lucy went in there. She wore them all. They were all gorgeous. But she chose one, the blue one. She liked that color so much. As she walked to the car, Nanny almost cried. What's going on with you? She couldn't understand.